O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, I'll try that again. O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, we are assembled here before thee to frame such laws as may tend to the welfare and prosperity of our province. Grant, O merciful God, we pray thee, that we may desire only that which is in accordance with thy will, that we may seek it with wisdom and know it with certainty and accomplish it perfectly, for the glory and honor of thy name and for the welfare of all our people. Amen. We acknowledge we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishin Inuak, Dakota Oyate, Dene Sulene, and Nihi-Thoag nations. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Good afternoon, everybody. Please be seated. In welcoming everybody back, I would just like to say it's nice to have everybody here, and it's nice to have members of the public in the gallery too. And I have a statement for the House. I must inform the House that Scott Fielding, the Honourable Member for Kirkland Park, has resigned his seat in the House effective June 17, 2022. I'm therefore tabling his resignation and my letter to the Lieutenant Governor and Council advising of the vacancy created in the House membership. And we have a new MLA that we will be introducing today, and I am pleased to inform the Assembly that the Clerk of the Legislative Assembly has received from the Chief Electoral Officer a letter indicating the election of Eric Redhead as member for the constituency of Thompson. I hereby table the motion of the return of the member elected.
Madam Speaker. Oh, closer still. Madam Speaker, I have the honor of presenting to you Eric Redhead, member for the constituency of Thompson. He has taken the oath, signed the roll, and is here to claim his right to take his seat.
On behalf of all honourable members, I wish to welcome you to the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba and to wish you well in your parliamentary career.
Mike.
We're doing that again. Yeah, one at a time we won't be doing that one again. Yeah. 40 members though. Your last one.
Routine proceedings, introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
I move, seconded by the MLA for St. John's, that Bill 210, the Restricting Mandatory Overtime for Nurses Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved and seconded, moved by the Honourable Member for Union Station, seconded by the Honourable Member for St. John's, that Bill number 210 be now read a first time. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Madam Speaker, I'm proud to present to the House Bill 210, the Restricting Mandatory Overtime for Nurses Act. Prior to the pandemic, our healthcare system struggled due to lack of capacity, exacerbated by the government's unwillingness to address nursing vacancies. Sadly, COVID-19 has only exposed and increased challenges where these gaps exist. Staffing vacancies have led to employers relying on mandating overtime to levels that put both the employee and patient safety at risk. Bill 210 will end the practice of using mandatory overtime to fill vacancies and vacation and allow nurses the right to refuse overtime and not be in breach of their duty of care. Thank you.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Further introduction of bills, the Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the member for Fort Rouge, that Bill number 211, the Manitoba Hydro Amendment Act, be now read for a first time.
Tim, nice cufflinks.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for St. James, seconded by the Honourable Member for Fort Rouge, that Bill number 211, the Manitoba Hydro Amendment Act, referendum before privatization of subsidiary, be now read a first time. The Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to introduce Bill 211, the Manitoba Hydro Amendment Act, referendum before privatization of subsidiary. Manitobans over generations have invested in Manitoba Hydro. It's our most important Crown corporation, but it is under threat. The Premier of our province stood alongside her predecessor, Brian Pallister, when he broke up and sold off pieces of Manitoba Hydro. We believe that it's wrong and that all Manitobans deserve a say before any part of hydro is privatized. This bill would require a referendum before any part of our Crown corporation is privatized because all Manitobans should have a say before this Crown is broken up and sold off. I look forward to debating this bill in the House as soon as possible, and I look forward to the support of all members for this bill.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Committee reports. The Honourable Member for Radisson.
Madam Speaker, I wish to present the third report of the Standing Committee on Legislative Affairs.
Your Standing Committee on Legislative Affairs.
Dispense. The Honourable Member for Radisson.
Madam Speaker, I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Rossmere, that the report of the committee be received.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Radisson, seconded by the Honourable Member for Rossmere, that the report of the committee be received. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Further committee reports. The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the fifth report of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
Your Standing Committee on Public
Dispense.
Accounts presents
The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Fort Rouge, that the report of the committee be received.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Elmwood, seconded by the Honourable Member for Fort Rouge, that the report of the committee be received. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Madam Speaker, I wish to present the 6th report of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
Your Standing Committee on Public
Dispense.
Accounts.
The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Madam Speaker, I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for the Paw, that the report of the committee be received.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Elmwood, seconded by the Honourable Member for the Paw, Kamisak, that the report of the committee be received. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. Ministerial statements. The Honourable Minister of Education, and I would indicate that the 90-minute notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 26, Bracket 2. Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with his statement?
Thank you. Madam Speaker, it's an exciting time in education and early childhood learning as we proclaim School Support Staff Recognition Week. From September 26th to September 30th of 2022, kindergarten to grade 12 students in Manitoba honor the work done every day by school support staff. As a former teacher myself, I know firsthand how much work goes on in and outside of the classroom to ensure that students not only arrive safely, but are supported in the school environment. School support staff work in a variety of occupations, such as a bus driver, educational assistant, courier, custodian, IT support, library technician, safety officer, administration, and so many more, Madam Speaker. I want to emphasize that school support staff perform a very important role in Manitoba schools, from the function of Manitoba's education system to aiding in keeping students safe, and as we have entered a more normal school year, and for that we thank them. School support staff help schools ensure that the education students receive is engaging and high quality. Their help prepares them for lifelong learning and participation in a socially just, democratic, and sustainable society. That is why our government has increased funding to the K-12 education system by $460 million in the 2022-23 school year. This includes a $51 million increase in annual operating funding and $77 million in additional funding to assist with financial pressures. $22 million strengthened student learning and supports, and $2 million to expand our Elders and Knowledge Keepers in Schools initiative. Our government has also dedicated $308 million in capital funding to build new schools and renovate existing ones. It is important that we acknowledge and thank our school support staff for their contribution and commitment to the education of Manitoba students. We celebrate the week of September 26th to September 30th of 2022 as School Support Staff Recognition Week right here in this great province of ours. I encourage all to express gratitude towards school support staff in our province, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased this afternoon to have the opportunity to express our gratitude to all of Manitoba's dedicated and hard-working educational support workers. The amount of time and effort support staff have dedicated to keep our kids safe and connected to learning over the past 2.5 years has been inspiring and significant. To those substitute teachers and those that substitute as EAs in our education system, we have been challenged through this function with your ongoing efforts these past 2.5 years, and we thank you for that. 2 EAs who have guided and supported our kids as they return to in-class learning, we thank you. To custodians and custodial aides who regularly have gone above and beyond to ensure students have clean and safe learning spaces, we thank you. To the school bus drivers who have returned to to safely transporting our kids to class every day, we thank you. To the library techs who foster and facilitate our youth's interest in books and other print and virtual medias and broadening their perspectives, we thank you. To the intercultural and community liaisons who commit to offering culturally appropriate and fulfilling experience for all of our students, we thank you. And finally, to tradespeople, office admin staff, board office staff, and other support workers in the education system, we thank you. All of your concerted efforts during this pandemic is what kept kids connected and engaged, which is indeed a lesson we won't soon forget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask for leave to respond to the minister's statement.
Does the member have leave to respond to the statement? Leave has been granted. The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to talk about School Support Recognition Week and the ongoing, tenacious and courageous work that everyone in our school systems continue to demonstrate, even at such unprecedented times. I believe that as MLAs, we have a responsibility within our education system. We need to ensure that our students are given the best opportunities to succeed, and we can be better doing this, Madam Speaker. We can be ensuring that nutrition programs in schools have continuous supports. We can make sure that school curriculums and provincial standards are being reviewed. And we need to double down on the safety in and around all of our schools. These are just a few examples. Further, Madam Speaker, as MLAs, we can also better support internationally trained educators. And we can ensure that students studying education, like all students, can afford post-secondary education and be provided incentive. That means salary and job opportunities to work here in Manitoba. Madam Speaker, I want to quickly share a unique example of how various groups within our education system work together every day. Yesterday, I attended an open house hosted by MAFTI, the Manitoba Association of Filipino Teachers, at Meadows West School in Tyndall Park. And I want to thank my two colleagues, the MLA for Point Douglas and the MLA for Notre Dame, for also attending. This open house is particularly special because it demonstrates how, in this case, the Winnipeg School Division, those working at Meadows West, community members, and MAFTI have worked together and launched a bilingual program with Meadows West School, which not only offers access to multicultural education to students, but opportunities for students and adults to learn Tagalog. This is the sort of work and initiative that those who work in our education system are always striving for, and why it is so important we recognize this work here today. So in closing, Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Minister for bringing forward this ministerial statement and the entire Education Department for the work that they're doing. And lastly, just all of the educators, whether that be teachers, EAs, those working as custodians as well, for the tremendous work that they're doing in our schools. Thank you.
Further ministerial statements, the Honourable Minister of Sport, Culture and Heritage, and I would indicate that the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 26, Bracket 2. Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with his statement?
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Dobry den. I rise today to recognize and celebrate Ukrainian Heritage Month. This is Manitoba's second year to participate in this special observance. While this month provides us with the opportunity to celebrate and reflect upon the rich heritage of Ukrainian Manitobans, this year's occasion has carried additional significance. As the unjust war in Ukraine continues, we think of our Ukrainian families here in Manitoba and offer our sincerest expression of support. Manitoba's Ukrainian community has played a historic role in making our province a place we know and love, with their perseverance, hard work, skills, and leadership contributing to so much of our province's collective success. Over the past year, Manitobans have demonstrated tremendous support for Ukrainian newcomers affected by the war. Whether it has been providing housing, education, skills training, or organizing summer youth activities, the collective efforts of families, volunteers, and nonprofit organizations has been nothing short of inspiring. To aid in these community-led efforts, the Manitoba government has provided support by developing a whole-of-government operational plan through the Ukrainian Refugee Task Force. The plan has delivered essential services, community programming, and networking opportunities, which has resulted in resettlement of hundreds of Ukrainian newcomers. As additional Ukrainian families come to our province, I know that Manitobans will continue to extend their warmest welcome. Madam Speaker, the roots of Manitoba's Ukrainian community are deep, with the initial settlement of Ukrainians dating back to 1895. From this humble beginning, the community has grown. Today, an estimated 1 in 7 Manitobans are of Ukrainian descent and are represented by over 10 community organizations, such as the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Dolina Ukrainian Dancers, Manitoba Parents of Ukrainian Education, and Plus Ukrainian Youth Association, to name but a few. As artists, activists, educators, and business owners, Ukrainian Manitobans continue to make significant contributions to the economic success and cultural vibrancy of our great province. Canada and Manitoba share a strong kinship with Ukraine and its people. In 1991, our nation was the first Western country to recognize Ukraine's independence. And since this momentous achievement, our two countries have fostered a relationship that supports our shared values and commitment to democracy. This past August, I was fortunate to be able to attend the ceremony celebrating the 31st anniversary of Ukraine's independence from the Soviet Union. It was wonderful to see that, despite challenging circumstances, the pride and resolve of the community remains as strong as ever. Celebrations were held right across our province to commemorate this day with concerts, dance performance, and festivals. Wherever you may find yourself in Manitoba, it doesn't take long to appreciate the impact of the Ukrainian community. Like many of my colleagues, I've attended events with the community over the years and can attest to the welcoming and communal spirit. Throughout each year, Manitobans commemorate and recognize Ukrainian culture and history through many events such as Vyshivanka Day, Holodomor Remembrance Day, and Canada's National Ukrainian Festival. In many ways, Ukrainian culture is synonymous with Manitoba's. For example, an undeniable link between Ukraine and our province is demonstrated by the popularity of Ukrainian cuisine. As anyone who's attended a wedding social or holiday celebration can attest, pierogis, holubchi, and kobasa have become Manitoban staples. As we begin to transition this fall season, I encourage all Manitobans to engage in multiple festivals and programs and activities offered by Ukrainian community organizations. On behalf of the people of Manitoba and the Manitoba government, I extend my best wishes to the Ukrainian community in honor of Ukrainian Heritage Month. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Dakuyid.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Celebrating Ukrainian heritage has always been important to Manitobans, but in particularly important now as Ukraine and its cultural heritage are under attack. The Ukrainian community in Manitoba is heartbroken to see their friends, loved ones, and homeland under siege. Ukraine has experienced many hardships in the past, and their heritage and culture has been repeatedly under attack in their country. We can see this happening again now because of Putin's illegal war. This attack on Ukraine is a direct threat to the rules-based international order and the democracies across the world. It's also a threat to Ukrainian heritage. This is why it's of particular importance that we celebrate Ukrainian heritage here in Manitoba. Ukraine has repeatedly overcome hardships to become a leader in artistic, culinary, and technical innovation. This September, we join with the people of Ukraine and Ukrainians in Manitoba in celebrating their heritage and standing up against the threat to Ukrainian people and their land. The Ukrainian community has deep roots in Manitoba, as early Ukrainian settlers and newcomers have helped shape the social, political, and cultural landscape of our province. Canada is home to more people of Ukrainian heritage than any other country except for Russia and Ukraine itself, 1.3 million according to the 2016 census. Manitoba has always played a significant role in Ukrainian resettlement to Canada, and we have the largest percentage of Ukrainians in Canada. Canada has also become home to a large number of Ukrainian educated professionals fleeing the Soviet Union between the end of World War II and the early 1960s. The importance of Ukrainians in Manitoba continues today. Over 180,000 Ukrainian Manitobans are currently living in the province, despite the fact that Ukrainians have come to Manitoba over the years because their culture was being threatened. Ukrainians in Manitoba continue to strengthen and enrich our culture and economy. Over the years, Ukrainian Canadians have made big contributions to Manitoba. They built roads, the railways, and businesses, and have enhanced our province by contributing to the cultural, artistic, and political life in Manitoba. We are proud to stand by Ukraine and celebrate Ukrainian heritage this month. Heroyam Slava.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I seek leave to speak to the ministerial statement.
Does the member have leave to respond to the ministerial statement? Leave has been granted. The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's a pleasure to speak to Ukrainian Heritage Month and to talk about the extraordinary contributions Ukrainians have made to building and shaping the history and future of our province. My son just started grade 7, and he has 6 new Ukrainian classmates who just arrived this year. Ukrainian contributions are both deep and broad to business, entertainment, art, music, dance, politics, labor activism, agriculture, faith, and of course, socials. Ukrainians have built this province, often escaping hardship and arriving to hardship. And they've built those new lives with joy, spirit, humor, and resilience. In the 1970s, my family bought a farm near Olha, Manitoba, current population 2, which is one of the areas where many Ukrainians settled when they first came to Manitoba in the parklands. Barely a kilometer away is a National Historic Site, a cairn that marks the site of a mass grave where a group of Ukrainian pioneers were staying in 1899. Tragically, that spring, scarlet fever swept through, killing 24 of the children and 3 adults. Yet, they persevered because they had to. Throughout the decades, Ukrainians have also faced discrimination and oppression for reasons of nationality, religion, and class. They were interned at the Osborne Barracks, which is the site of this legislature, and at the time, respected figures even suggested they'd be denied the right to vote. Winnipeg was also one of the site of the major Ukrainian nationalist organizations in the 1920s, as recognized at Osterok. And as it happens, my grandfather was a friend and supporter to the Ukrainian community. He was the first Anglo lawyer to have a Jewish and Ukrainian law partner at Lamont, Buriak, and Zivit. And he defended several Ukrainians who were unfortunately accused of making moonshine. As a show of gratitude for their freedom, the wrongly accused individuals would give my grandfather at Christmas a crate of clear alcohol, which for some reason came in unlabeled bottles. My grandfather would use it to make his famous Christmas punch, which he took great pleasure in serving to the courts of appeal, judges of the Court of Appeal. The reality, the statute of limitations is passed now, by the way. The reality is that amidst suffering and oppression, Ukrainians have made a rich and deep contribution to the fabric of Manitoba life, born from centuries of struggle, but they have done so with tremendous joy. We are grateful for them, extend our love and best wishes to them, and wish for a swift and certain victory in Ukraine. Slava Ukraina.
Member statements. The honourable member for Springfield Rashat.
Today I wish to draw attention to an investment in my community by our government that is producing tangible results. I'm of course talking about our investment into a roundabout north of Oakbank at the intersection of PR 206 and Garvin Road. This intersection can be quite busy as it is the meeting point of traffic between Oakbank and Winnipeg. Furthermore, this intersection is also near many gravel quarries, seeing frequent use from gravel trucks. These factors have made this intersection quite dangerous in the past. Before this roundabout was put in place, there were multiple accidents that had happened at the intersection. One was a fatal head-on collision happening October 22nd, 2019. Another accident of note was one earlier that spring where a man was seriously injured. As a government committed to safety, this is something that we could not continue to allow to happen. Soon after the October 22nd accident, I had the opportunity to announce a speed limit decrease as well as a coming roundabout. The public engagement was fantastic to see, and by the end of 2021, the roundabout was complete. Having a roundabout in place continues to allow the consistent flow of traffic without necessitating the stopping of traffic like with a stoplight. Many of my constituents who had at the time voiced their opposition to this roundabout have now come to me and said how much this changes things for the better. Since the completion of this roundabout, there has not been a single accident. Here is tangible, visible evidence that our government is always investing and improving public safety. I know we all look forward to continued improvement to public safety in our province.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for St. John's.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. On September 4th, we learned of the mass murder of 10 James Smith Cree Nation citizens. The mass murder in James Smith Cree Nation shook my colleagues and I, particularly as Indigenous members in this legislature. Regardless of where we're situated, Indigenous peoples are connected in a very deep way. We are heartbroken for our James Smith Cree relatives, and stand in solidarity with families and community. It should be well understood the historical impact of colonization continues to be felt by Indigenous peoples, and it's clear these conditions contributed in this tragedy. The intergenerational colonial traumas and systemic conditions we cope with on a daily basis, like mental health, addictions, cultural displacement, lack of housing, systemic levels of poverty, just to name a few, Madam Speaker, are routinely underestimated and dismissed. And yet, despite all of this, the community, alongside many other First Nation communities, have been an example of coming together in love and compassion for one another. Donations have come in from across our territories. James Smith Cree Nation leadership, elders, and community have focused on ensuring that their youth have the mental health supports and activities that they need and that they deserve to know that they are loved by the community. And most beautiful, Madam Speaker, was the love and grace shown by matriarchs who cooked a feast for the funeral of one of the two brothers. This is who Indigenous people are. My thoughts and energy continue to be with the community and the families of Thomas Burns, Carol Burns, Gregory Burns, Lydia Gloria Burns, Bonnie Burns, Earl Burns, Lana Head, Christian Head, Robert Sanderson, and Wesley Patterson. Rest in power, relatives. Good.
The honourable member for Borderland.
Madam Speaker, the constituency of Borderland is home to 4 municipalities, Stanley, Rhineland, Montcalm, and Emerson Franklin. With municipal elections coming up on October 26th, I want to take this opportunity to welcome those who have been acclaimed to leadership positions in these communities and to thank in particular outgoing arm of Stanley Reeve, Morris Olofsson, and Town of Altona Mayor Al Friesen. Morris Olofsson has served 2 terms as the Reeve for the arm of Stanley, and anyone who knows him knows that Morris is a straight shooter who speaks in plain English. He's very much a get-it-done kind of individual, and the arm of Stanley certainly has prospered during the last 8 years. I had the privilege, after getting elected, of jumping in Morris's truck and going along for a tour of the arm of Stanley from Morris's perspective. And I thank him for taking the time to discuss the challenges and opportunities and ways we could work together to promote the growth and development of the area. Throughout these last few years, it's been a pleasure working with Morris. He has been a true advocate for the community, and I wish him well as he looks forward. Al Friesen has contributed much to the community of Altona, and many remember him from his previous 40-plus years on the radio at CFAM 950. He joined council in 2014, became mayor of Altona in 2018. Al leaves behind a legacy as someone who was a champion of his community, someone who wasn't afraid to have a difficult conversation if it meant speaking up for the community, and who understood that community is as much about relationships and having a spirit of neighborliness as it is about bricks and mortar. I always appreciate Al's courteous, mild-mannered, and frank approach to tackling the issues, and I wish him well in the next chapter. Congratulations to Harv Schrader, who was acclaimed as Altona Mayor, as well as to Emerson Franklin Reeve Dave Carlson, Montcalm Reeve Paul Gilmore, and Rhineland Reeve Don Weeb, who will be continuing in their positions. I look forward to working with all of you to advance the interests of our communities. Thank you.
The honourable member for Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise for the first time as MLA for the people of Thompson to express my gratitude to them. Thank you for the people of Thompson for putting your trust in me. I am so grateful to all of you. Whether you voted for me or not, I will do my best to represent you and your concerns. I was born in Thompson, worked in healthcare, served on my council, and then as chief of Shamattawa First Nation for 2 terms. Before running in a provincial by-election following the untimely passing of Daniel Adams. Daniel had only been elected in 2019. Her passing is a tragedy. I certainly never expected that I might be an elected provincial official. Thank you to everyone who helped work on my campaign. Thank you to Blair Hudson, Kaylin Labe, and the many, many other volunteers who helped make this possible. I especially want to thank my family who have supported me through these recent changes. my parents, Christine and Ernie, my children, Sage, Sweetgrass, Starlet, and Shimmer. And I also want to acknowledge and remember my sister, who lost her life due to mental health struggles more than a year ago. Before representing my community, I worked as an aide to support psychiatric care and help people struggling with mental health and addictions challenges. I feel strongly that much more needs to be done to support people. The last few years have been very difficult on people's mental health, and the addiction crisis has had a major impact across the province. I will do my best to bring the concerns and your priorities to the Manitoba Legislature. Finally, to my colleagues in the room, I look forward to working with you and honoring the memory of my predecessor and representing the communities that have placed their trust in us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was a great honor to bring greetings on behalf of all Manitobans at a dedication ceremony and unveiling of a marker to recognize the wartime achievements of Lieutenant Colonel Lockhart Ross Fulton at the Birtle Cemetery on Saturday, September 17th. Lieutenant Colonel Fulton was the last commanding officer of the Royal Winnipeg Rifles during the Second World War. Lockie, as he was known, led his company into battle on D-Day in June 1944, where he and the men under his command faced overwhelming odds, intense gunfire, and numerous casualties to reach the shores of Normandy. Their success at Juno Beach, and in turn the Allied victory, can be attributed in part to the effective leadership and tactical brilliance of this farm boy from Birtle, Manitoba. For his leadership and personal courage, Lockie was awarded the Distinguished Service Order by Field Marshal Montgomery. Part of the citation read, "Major Fulton's personal bravery, his complete disregard for his own safety, and his coolness and skill in leading his command are considered to be in keeping with the highest traditions of the service." After the war, Lockie returned to his hometown of Birtle, where he was a successful farmer and a key contributor to many organizations in the community. He also shared his military experiences with younger generations of officers at the Canadian Land Force Command and Staff College for over a decade. He was awarded the Order of Canada in 2003. Lockie, who passed away in 2005 at the age of 88, never lost touch with many of his old comrades and with the regiment itself, maintaining a mutual air of great respect and affection. Madam Speaker, I ask all members to join with me in recognizing Lieutenant Colonel Lockhart Fulton for his commitment, courage, and strength of character, which are now immortalized forever. I also want to thank all our military members, past and present, for their service and sacrifice.
Here.
I now have the opportunity to introduce to you the pages that will be with us for the 2022-2023 session. And I'm delighted to welcome them here. And I would ask everybody to please hold your applause until I have completed the introductions. We have from College Churchill High School, Miss Rivi Amy. From College Bellevaux, Miss Tunteya Stoller. From Murdoch McKay Collegiate, Miss Kylie Hebert. From St. John's Ravencourt School, Mr. Kai Jasal. From St. Paul's High School, Mr. Oscar Levitt. From the University of Winnipeg Collegiate, Ms. Harshnor Mon. From Fort Richmond Collegiate, Ms. Sonia Ruprai. From St. Mary's Academy, Ms. Bavika Sandhu. From Murdoch McKay Collegiate, Ms. Chloe Talenko. And from St. Boniface Diocesan High School, Elena Varelli. And on behalf of all honorable members here, we welcome you all to the Manitoba Legislature. And I would indicate that some of the parents of the pages are here in the gallery today and watching the introduction of their students. Thank you very much to the pages. We also have seated in the public gallery from Springs Christian Academy 22 grade 11 students under the direction of Brad Dowler, and this group is located in the constituency of the Honourable Member for St. Boniface. And we also welcome all of you to the Manitoba Legislature. Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I'd like to welcome all of our pages and to add that one of their parents is seated in the chamber with us. The member for the Maples is Bavika's father. So congratulations to you all. At this time, I want to acknowledge the passing of Bill Blakey. Bill Blakey was a member of this Legislative Assembly as well as a member of Parliament. He was a giant in our party, in our politics, and in our province. He served the people of Transcona and for a time also Birds Hill with tremendous passion, intelligence, and throughout he was guided by faith. At this time I want to send our most sincere condolences to the Blakey family who have all contributed so much to this province. We are with them as they mourn their father and husband, Bill. I do have a question on healthcare, but I wanted to make those comments about Mr. Blakey first.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I too want to welcome all of our new pages to the Manitoba Legislature. We wish you well during your time here with all of us. And I also want to welcome the new member for Thompson to the Chamber as well, and wish him well during his time as an MLA here in the Manitoba Chamber. I also want to extend my condolences to the Blakey family, to his wife Brenda, to his 4 children and grandchildren, and of course the rest of the Blakey family. We know that Bill was a man of deep faith and conviction. Madam Speaker, he was a wonderful member in this chamber. I know I sat in this chamber, and I know you did too, when he was a member of the Manitoba Legislature, and we enjoyed those deliberations back and forth at that time, of course, Madam Speaker, and of course, you know, he was a member of the House of Commons. He had an extraordinary life that was dedicated to public service, Madam Speaker, and I just wanted to say that we, in honor of Bill Blakey, we did fly the flags on the legislative grounds at half-mast in his honor, and we are encouraging all Manitobans to donate to the Transcona Food Bank in his name. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, I also want to take a moment to welcome you back. I hope that you had a good summer. I know that Manitobans were struggling with many issues over the course of this summer, healthcare being one of the top priorities of people across this great province. Now, we watched the government scramble and make announcement after announcement after announcement this summer, and yet they did absolutely nothing when it comes to healthcare. Healthcare today, as we gather in this esteemed chamber, is worse than it has ever been in Manitoba. Waits at emergency rooms are no longer measured in hours, they're measured in days. And that is for the emergency rooms that remain open, Madam Speaker. This government has cut health care ever since they've come to office, and we see the effects today. Will the Premier announce that she is going to stop Brian Pallister's cuts to health care?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and the Leader of the Opposition does have one thing right. In fact, all the members on our side of the House were busy working and with all Manitobans, visiting Manitobans right throughout this great province of ours during the course of the summer. Madam Speaker, we were making announcements, we were listening to Manitobans, we were working with Manitobans, and we were delivering on exactly what they wanted, and that's what those announcements are all about. We are getting things done on behalf of Manitobans in the province of Manitoba.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
I want to thank the First Minister for confirming that her government did nothing on health care for this entire summer. Again, if you travel across this great province right now, the #1 priority that will be raised time and time again is the crisis in our healthcare system. Now, we know that they are trying to pander and try to buy votes from people across the province, but they haven't done anything about improving healthcare in Manitoba. Again, I'll talk to you about a doctor. This is a direct quote. The standard of care that we're able to provide patients is not what I would expect. It's approaching a level of danger, and it's crossed over into collapse. That is the legacy of this Premier from her time as Health Minister. That is the legacy of this cabinet that started under Brian Pallister, and it continues to this day. This cabinet has a choice. Will they continue Mr. Pallister and the Stephenson government's cuts, or will they finally end the cuts to health care?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition and members opposite were doing nothing this summer, Madam Speaker, we were out visiting and we were out listening to Manitobans. We were listening to Manitobans and we were getting things done on behalf of Manitobans. We recognize there's challenges in healthcare, not just here in Manitoba, but right across our country, Madam Speaker. And we recognize when it comes to surgical and diagnostics, we want to ensure that Manitobans get the healthcare they need when they need it. That's why, Madam Speaker, we have contracted out for those services. The Leader of the Opposition said he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. He would deny those individuals the access to those services in Manitoba, Madam Speaker. I will tell you, we will stand up for Manitobans and get them the health care that they need when they need it, Madam Speaker.
Order. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
Well, Madam Speaker, I think it's very telling that on the first day of this session, you see the First Minister getting so fired up about one of her top priorities. She's getting so fired up about her top priority, which is privatizing healthcare, contracting out, in her words. And we will be committed to fighting against this privatization agenda every step of the way. But the other major area where this government completely failed to listen to the priorities of Manitoba was on making life more affordable. For all the announcements that they made, they did nothing to make the cost of living more affordable for the people of Manitoba. In fact, they are bringing forward Bill 36, which will raise everybody in Manitoba's hydro rates by 5%, Madam Speaker. We think that's wrong. Will they abandon Bill 36 and their 5% rate increase?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is right about one thing. I am fired up and I'm passionate about doing what's in the best interest of all Manitobans.
Right on one issue.
And I will never apologize for that, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we announced an affordability package this summer, Madam Speaker, and maybe the Leader of the Opposition and members opposite neglected to see what it was, because it gave more money to Manitoba families. It offered more affordability for seniors in our province. It raised the minimum wage and took a responsible approach at phasing that in and helping those businesses that need it through those times, Madam Speaker. We announced also support for food banks, Madam Speaker. These are things that make life more affordable for Manitobans. That is our plan. I ask the Leader of the Opposition, where is his plan? What does he have?
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
You know, and it's not just the First Minister. There are many members of this PC caucus which are ignoring the cost of living crisis that Manitobans are facing. In the paper today, the MLA for Radisson, whoever that is, said that of Bill 36 and its 5% rate increase, that it's not particularly top of mind with his voters. Madam Speaker, at a time of record inflation, for this First Minister to send out as her spokesperson on the first day of session somebody who doesn't think that making your hydro rates more expensive by 5% is top of mind, well, that shows you everything that's wrong with this PC government. We say Bill 36 is a mistake. Increasing hydro rates on the good, hardworking people of Manitoba at this time is a mistake, and that's why we delayed it for this entire year. We delayed it to give Manitobans a chance to speak up, and we're delaying it to give this First Minister and her cabinet an opportunity to back away, as they did a year ago from Bill 35, from Bill 36 this year. Will they do so?
The member's time has expired. The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, once again, the Leader of the Opposition has no plan, no vision for the future. He has nothing to say about affordability for Manitobans. He doesn't tell them what his plan is to make life more affordable for Manitobans, because he doesn't plan to make life more affordable for Manitobans, Madam Speaker. That is, in fact, what has happened in the past with previous NDP governments, is they made life less affordable for Manitobans. We are committed to making it more affordable for Manitobans. We will continue to make that happen.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, our plan on this side of the House is simple. We are going to make your life more affordable, starting with your Manitoba hydro bill. Regular families are seeing their cost of living go up because this government continues to make life more expensive. After being the first government in the history of Manitoba to legislate more expensive Manitoba hydro bills a few years ago, they're back at it again this fall with Bill 36. They want to pass a law that will increase everyone in this province's hydro bills by 5%. That's after a summer of more expensive gas and more expensive groceries. Why do they think that Manitobans deserve to pay more bills at this time? Or will they finally get on side with public opinion in Manitoba and stop the hydro rate increases?
Great question.
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, it's important to remind Manitobans that for 17 years, the NDP mismanaged Manitoba Hydro, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in today, Madam Speaker. But what we are doing, Madam Speaker, is we are focused on making life more affordable for Manitobans. That's why we announced this summer an increase in minimum wage, Madam Speaker. We increased more monies, the monies to Manitoba families, Madam Speaker. More money to make it more affordable for seniors, for food banks. We will continue. There's more good news to come, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Thank you much, Madam Speaker. Well, the Stephenson government refuses to follow the rules. We learned yesterday Tina Jones is suing the MLA for Fort White for failing to repay funds from his business, failing to not pay a woman entrepreneur, Madam Speaker. That's not a good look for the member. But we also learned the company operated by the MLA for Fort White, the one subject to this lawsuit, was never disclosed to Manitobans in his conflict of interest declaration. That's against the rules, Madam Speaker. I'll table the documents. Will the Premier tell this House why members of her PC caucus continue to break conflict of interest rules?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And the member opposite should know that she's referencing a case, a private case that's currently before the court system. It's not prudent for us as government to speak about that particular case, that private case that is before the courts.
The honourable member for St. John's on a supplementary question.
The law is clear, Madam Speaker. If you have shares in a company in Canada or Costa Rica, you have to declare them. But the MLA for Fort White hasn't done so. We only learned about this company because of the lawsuit. We know the Premier fails to follow the conflict of interest laws. And now we're learning that more and more of her members also do not follow the law. There needs to be one set of rules for everybody, Madam Speaker, including the PC caucus. The Premier needs to explain why the MLA for Fort White broke the rules and what she plans on doing about it.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, Madam Speaker, a question coming from the members opposite that know quite a bit about breaking rules, Madam Speaker, and about breaking the law. But Madam Speaker, quite clearly we're hearing accusations all the time coming from members opposite, have never been proven, and quite frankly, Madam Speaker, again, this particular matter is before the courts. It's not prudent for our government to speak about this while this private matter is before the courts.
Right. The honourable member for St. John's on a final supplementary.
The Deputy Premier doesn't realize we're talking about breaking conflict of interest rules / laws. That's not before the court, so he can get up and answer for his MLA for Fort White. Madam Speaker, we've also learned that he is a director of 7 other companies he failed to list on his conflict of interest declaration forms. I'll table the documents. Manitobans expect MLAs to follow the law. Manitobans expect the Premier and her caucus to declare their conflict of interest and not try to hide them, Madam Speaker. Manitobans deserve accountability, and I would ask the Premier again, what actions will she take regarding the MLA for Fort White,
Member's
given
time
his
has
failed
expired. Order. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, Madam Speaker, I mean, we've heard these allegations coming from across the way before, Madam Speaker, and there hasn't been any basis for those allegations. Madam Speaker, I am not going to comment on these allegations that have been brought forward today. Madam Speaker, in respect of the court case, again, it's a private matter before the courts. Madam Speaker, we will stand.
Order. Order.
We will stand by the member for Fort White and for the great work that he is doing in supporting his constituents.
The honourable member for Union Station.
Madam Speaker, seniors at Lyons Place at 610 Portage Avenue are deeply concerned about the future and affordability of their home. Lyons Housing Centres is being forced to sell after a financial agreement with the PC government expired. That agreement happened after residents, local advocates, and the NDP urged the government to action. At the time, the government said that they had, and I quote, a conscience and concern for low-income tenants. Yet, that agreement expired. Where's the government's concern now, Madam Speaker? Will they take action and ensure Lyons Place is not sold?
The Honourable Minister of Families.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And of course, we are going to be meeting with the Seniors Action Committee from the Lyons Centre on October the 3rd. They wrote to me on September the 19th, and we responded very quickly to organize a meeting so that we can sit and talk about the options and opportunities on a go-forward basis.
The honourable member for Union Station on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, Lyons has run Lyons Place for decades for the benefit of seniors. Any potential sale puts the long-term affordability of this building very much at risk. The PC government has already sold off hundreds of social housing units in my constituency of Union Station and in other constituencies as well to the private sector. We are facing a housing affordability crisis. We should not be losing any more social and affordable housing in Manitoba. Will the minister make permanent the expired financial agreement with Lions, and will she ensure that Lions Place is not sold, and will she do so today?
The Honourable Minister of Families.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to remind the members opposite that it is this government that signed on to the National Housing Strategy. It is this government that's committed to building social and affordable housing units. That is why we've created 745 new units since we formed office at a price of $110 million. That is why we're also investing in a residential renters tax credit this year so that people can have tax relief when they're living in rental accommodations. I would like to remind the House also that under the NDP, when that particular building went vacant or was needing repair and maintenance in the member's constituency, what did the NDP do? They let the place remain vacant for years.
Yeah.
Oh.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, taking federal housing dollars while you sell off hundreds of affordable housing units is shameful. The seniors living at Lions Place should not have to worry about unaffordable rent. I've written the minister about this matter, and I have yet to hear anything back from her. As Gerald Brown, the Senior Action Committee at Lions Place, a member, has also written the minister. And Mr. Brown explains that selling this facility risks increased rents and less affordable renters for seniors. That's not the right approach, Madam Speaker. We need to preserve affordable and social housing in this province, and this government is headed in the exact opposite direction. Will the minister reverse course and ensure that 610 Portage remains with the Lions for now and for the future?
The Honourable Minister of Families.
Well, Madam Speaker, as I already shared with the members opposite, our government is committed to building affordable and social housing units. That is why we've taken many measures, including signing on to the National Housing Strategy to build new units. That is why we have 745 new units built in the province under our watch since we signed on to that strategy. That is why we're also committed to making life more affordable for people who are living in rental accommodations. And that is why I am meeting with the Seniors Action Committee to talk about future opportunities for this particular privately held property. Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Thompson.
Madam Speaker, for 3 years, the people of Thompson and surrounding communities have been without foot care services. There's no lack of demand for foot care services. Over 2,400 people have signed a petition to restore the service in Thompson. Foot care service is a preventative form of healthcare that keep people out of hospital and reduce surgeries. Will this government reverse their cuts and restore foot care services to Thompson, Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Thompson for the question and welcome him to the Manitoba Legislature. Madam Speaker, I had the honor and privilege of being in Thompson this week, as well as Norway House, talking to leaders of those communities about the needs of the community, and also shared with them, and yes, it was over the summer months, what our government has done to help those living in the north. $4.3 million for 37 additional nurse training seats at University College of the North, and I had an opportunity to see the satellite office in Norway House. Madam Speaker, we are going to continue to meet the needs of Manitobans in the north and throughout this province. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Thompson on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, that didn't answer my question. Cutting preventative healthcare services like foot care make no sense. Foot care services save government money and otherwise would be spent on expensive surgeries and hospital stays. Unfortunately, this government is not thinking about the future, only their current bottom line. But they have the power to change this, Madam Speaker. Will the minister do the right thing and restore foot care service to Thompson, Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to share with the House a very historic moment this week where I was up in Thompson signing the declaration for the elimination of Indigenous-specific racism in the healthcare system, at the table with MKO, at the table with Kim and the Northern Regional Health Authority. That was a historic moment that I want to ensure Manitobans are aware of. I also want them to know about the $812 million, Madam Speaker, that our government has invested in rural and northern healthcare services to create a northern intermediary hub and to ensure Manitobans living not just in Thompson but throughout the north get the care that they need.
The honourable member for Thompson on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, I'm still waiting for an answer to my question. Preventative healthcare service such as foot care service help keep people healthy in the community and out of hospital. The services save people a lot of pain down the road and also the government a lot of money. One toe amputation costs $14,000, where a visit to foot care service costs $50. Unfortunately, this government's cuts to Thompson foot care services in 2019 have hurt the people of Thompson and continue to hurt the surrounding area. Will the minister commit to restoring Thompson's foot care service today?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Thompson for the question. Madam Speaker, care teams are engaged with Indigenous leadership and stakeholders to help co-plan the $812 million investment our government has made. We're excited to be working with our northern partners to provide care closer to home, to ensure individuals do not have to travel long distances away from their families and their support system for care. Madam Speaker, I was in the north over the summer months listening to these stakeholders, listening to people at the grassroots. What is the plan from the NDP to listen to Manitobans? They have no plan.
The honourable member for Kiwetanuk.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Orange Shirt Day is an important day for truth and reconciliation here in Manitoba. We have been calling for it to be made a provincial statutory holiday, and as have many people across the province. Last year, the Premier said that, and I quote, "It's part of reconciliation and moving forward on that front if we do go in that direction." Unfortunately, they have yet to do so, but they have that opportunity. They can pass Bill 200, the Orange Shirt Day Statutory Holiday Act. It is before this House now. Will they support passing Bill 200 today?
The Honourable Minister of Labour, Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So today, this year, on September 30th, we have a provincial day of recognition for truth and reconciliation, as we did last year. Provincial staff that are not essential have the day to learn about truth and reconciliation. We highly encourage that, as do schools and child cares. They are all encouraged all this week to learn about truth and reconciliation. Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Kiwetanuk on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Earlier this year, when the Premier was asked if she would make Orange Shirt Day a statutory holiday, she answered, and I quote, "I think if there's a will, there's a way." So even the Premier admits that it just takes a political will to make this a reality. Madam Speaker, the will is right here in this chamber right now. In June, Parliament unanimously supported legislation for a federal holiday honoring the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It is time for the same here. Madam Speaker, the groundwork, the discussions, the consultations have been heard. This passage can happen now. This can be done today. Will this government commit to passing Bill 200 today?
The Honourable Minister of Labour, Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, over the past several months, we have been consulting with a wide variety of groups across Manitoba, including Labour, business, First Nations, Manitoba Métis Federation, the Inuit, and many others, Madam Speaker. All those discussions have been happening as recently as yesterday, and the discussion has changed over the past year on what they're suggesting should happen on September 30th. So we're listening to those people that are telling us what they want to see in September 30th, Madam Speaker, and we'll work with them to make sure that it's done well.
The honourable member for Kiiwetinoong on a final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Provincial statutory holiday allows everyone to participate in conversation, education, and reconciliation in their own way. Indigenous people have voiced their support, but not just Indigenous people, Madam Speaker. Support is being voiced by all aspects and demographics in Manitoba. Manitobans are calling for it. There is a will, at least on this side of the House anyway. It will honor the lost children and survivors of residential schools and allow Manitobans to learn what truth and reconciliation means to Indigenous people here in Manitoba. The Premier has suggested this might have support from her. Well, time's up. Time is here, and now to make this happen. Will they join us and support Bill 200 today and make Orange Shirt Day a statutory holiday here in Manitoba today?
The Honourable Minister of Labour, Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, as I said, Madam Speaker, we continue to listen to Manitobans. Obviously, the members opposite have stopped listening to Manitobans. There's much work that is being done for September 30th. We encourage all Manitobans to participate in the recognition of that day. It's a very important day, Madam Speaker. Lots more to learn as we move forward on this. The stories are heart-wrenching, Madam Speaker, and I encourage Manitobans to attend ceremonies on September 30th, listen to the survivors, and learn from it, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 2 weeks ago, severely injured patients in the Health Sciences Centre ER were waiting up to 170 hours for care. The HSC hit its limit with no beds available after a summer of non-stop warnings and SOSs from nurses. At the time, it was called unprecedented, but we have nurses fleeing the healthcare system, quitting in droves because this government can't get its act together. The people who are shouldering all the responsibility of keeping the system running are breaking under the weight of it because this minister is not doing their job. We don't have confidence that the minister can fix this, and we called for their resignation 2 weeks ago. We're doing that again today. Will the Minister of Health accept responsibility for the endless failures in our healthcare system and resign?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Nursing staffing challenges are an issue for all provinces across this country. It's not a unique challenge for Manitoba. In fact, it's even globally being seen. Our government has taken this issue as a priority, and it's a very serious matter, and that is why we've added $19.5 million investment to expand nurse training seats, 259, and I was joined by the Minister for Immigration and Advanced Education to announce an additional 30 seats, bringing that to 289, and we are going to continue to tackle this issue, which is a priority for this government.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, people are leaving the system much faster than they can be replaced. This morning I received an email from rural Manitoba where there have been ambulance waits, closed urgent cares and staffing shortages, and we're not talking about rural, remote areas, we're talking about a couple of hours from Winnipeg. Let's be clear, this government froze healthcare spending for 3 years straight. They put one number in the budget and turn around and ask for 15% cuts across the board, even as federal transfers have gone up by $1 billion. Even during this pandemic, the government ignored every warning and kept imposing disruptive waves of reorganization. Our system relies on people, and people are quitting the health system and leaving the province. Ministers are supposed to resign because it shows that someone somewhere is willing to pay the price for their own mistakes instead of forcing everyone else to. Will the minister stop blaming others and accept responsibility for these crises by resigning?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and that is why, while the federal health minister was here in Winnipeg joining me for an announcement, I explained that our government needs the Premier, the Prime Minister, to come to the table to have discussions with premiers across this country about increasing the Canada Health Transfer. And Madam Speaker, I did see on social media that the member for St. Boniface actually agreed with our government and said that he had written to the Prime Minister and written to all the premiers to say that we need more funding for health care. And so I hope the member for St. Boniface will join with me to say that we don't need boutique announcements. What we need is an increase to the Canada Health Transfer.
The honourable member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, cancelling the health care coverage for international students was cruel and unfair. The dollars the government saved were likely less than the extra expense resulting from students not visiting a doctor when they should have, and their condition getting worse and costing more. As well, it signaled to international students there's no reason to stay in Manitoba with such an unfriendly government. Many who decided to stay in Canada have gone to other provinces. This has meant we're losing young people who could have contributed significantly to the future of our province. Why did the government decide to cut health coverage for international students, and when will it be reinstated?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last week I was at the University of Manitoba. I met with Abrar and Sylvia, international students from Bangladesh. And one thing I always ask international students when I'm on campus is, why Manitoba? Why did you study in a post-secondary institution in Manitoba? The reason why is because of the great programs that our post-secondary institutions offer and the low tuition costs. The lowest tuition costs in Canada. Manitoba is a destination of choice for international students from all over. Since 2017-18, international student enrollment in Manitoba has gone up almost 22%. And at the University of Winnipeg, it has doubled. These are students that want to come here because of our low tuition and the best provincial nominee program for them to stay in Manitoba permanently. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Borderland.
Madam Speaker, the cost of living has been increasing at its fastest pace in decades. The cost of food, gas, shelter, and other household goods have all risen significantly, and Manitoban families are feeling the pinch. Can the Minister of Finance share further details on the government's recently announced affordability package?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Borderland for the question. Manitobans are feeling the effect of rising prices, and our government is there to help out, announcing the Family Affordability Package as a targeted approach to the delivery of affordable benefits, specifically focused on families with children and seniors on a fixed income. And we know that for families with one child, they will receive $250. For families with more than one child, $200 more for each one of those. Low-income seniors with an income of less than $40,000 will receive a $300 affordability payment. I am happy to share that these affordability checks have started to flow. They are in the mailboxes now and being delivered in the coming weeks. Manitobans need financial relief. Our government continues to take action.
Order. The honourable member for St. Vital.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the school year resumes, so does this government's attack on post-secondary institutions. They've cut funding by nearly 18% to universities, and they've raised university tuition by a whopping 25% since 2016. That represents $1,200 more a year for students. They're paying that ever since this government took office. It's simply unaffordable for students. Thankfully, the minister has an opportunity, the power to reverse course. So will he do so today?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government held various consultations to obtain feedback to inform policy development. These included virtual consultation meetings with post-secondary administrators and student associations, a public survey with Manitobans, and written submissions from key stakeholders. I thank everyone for their feedback and input toward informing the development of a policy. We look forward to developing a policy that ensures post-secondary education remains accessible and affordable for Manitoban students while providing our colleges and universities with the revenue they need to operate sustainably and provide world-class programming. We have a plan, they do not, Madam Speaker.
Good answer.
The honourable member for St. Vital on a supplementary question.
Let's be clear, Madam Speaker. The government is actively making life more expensive for students. They've increased tuition by 25%. They cut international student health care. Since the cut, we've heard story after story of students having to pay thousands of dollars for hospital stays. This is wrong, Madam Speaker. The good news is that we have the opportunity through the minister today who could make the right choice. Will the minister commit to reinstating provincial health care coverage for international students? And will he do so today?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Madam Speaker, I want to assure that all students who enroll in our PSIs, including international students, have healthcare coverage here in Manitoba. International students in Manitoba are almost paying almost 45% tuition compared to the NDP-governed province of British Columbia. Our government is committed to keeping tuition one of the lowest in Canada and cutting taxes for all Manitobans, including students, to make life more affordable. The NDP have no plan for affordability. Their only plan is to tax more students, making life less affordable. We will take no lessons from the tax and spend NDP who have no plan. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There you go.
The time for oral questions has expired. Petitions. Are there any petitions? If not, grievances? Moving on then to orders of the day, government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have a number of leave requests related to House business for today and for next month. Could you please canvass the House for leave to 1, allow the Government House Leader to call for debate this afternoon a motion of condolence for Queen Elizabeth II, which is currently on the notice paper. 2, to allow the debate on that motion of condolence to proceed as follows. The first 3 speakers will be as follows. 1, the Premier, 2, the Leader of the Official Opposition, and 3, the member for St. Boniface. These first 3 speakers may each speak for up to 30 minutes. Subsequent speakers may each speak for up to 5 minutes. The House will not see the clock today until the question has been put on this motion. 3, to allow the House to not sit on October 24th, but instead to sit on Friday, October 28th from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., including routine proceedings followed by the consideration of departmental estimates in the Committee of Supply under orders of the day.
Is there leave? 1, to allow the Government House Leader to call for debate this afternoon a motion of condolence for Queen Elizabeth II, which is currently on the notice paper. 2, to allow the debate on that motion of condolence to proceed as follows. The first 3 speakers will be as follows: the Premier, the Leader of the Official Opposition, and the member for St. Boniface. These first 3 speakers may each speak for up to 30 minutes. Subsequent speakers may each speak for up to 5 minutes. The House will not see the clock today until the question has been put on this motion. And number 3 is to allow the House to not sit on October 24th, but instead to sit on Friday, October 28th, from 10 to 12:30, including routine proceedings followed by the consideration of departmental estimates in the Committee of Supply under orders of the day. Is there leave? Leave has been granted. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Could you please call this afternoon the motion of condolence for Queen Elizabeth II?
It has been announced that the condolence motion for Queen Elizabeth II will now take place, and I will call on the Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Leader of the Opposition, that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba express its profound grief and sorrow at the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
It has been moved by the Honourable First Minister, seconded by the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition, that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba express its profound grief and sorrow at the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise in the House today to recognize the extraordinary life and legacy of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada. After 7 decades of steadfast service, Queen Elizabeth passed away peacefully on September 8th at the age of 96. On her 21st birthday in 1947, less than 2 years after the end of the Second World War, the young Princess Elizabeth made a solemn vow to the people of the United Kingdom and the entire Commonwealth. She declared, and I quote, that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong, end quote. As the Archbishop of Canterbury said at her state funeral, the first of its kind since the death of Winston Churchill, rarely has such a promise been so well kept. From her accession to the throne in February 1952 until her death earlier this month, Her late Majesty was a constant presence in our lives. Her devotion to duty was a guiding light throughout our post-war history. In our darkest moments, including most recently during the COVID-19 pandemic, she was always there to comfort us and inspire us to a higher purpose. In her address to the Commonwealth during the worst days of the pandemic, she assured us, and I quote, "We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again." Her late Majesty's passing has been a time for Manitobans from all walks of life to meet again, to reflect on everything our Queen has meant to us. Thousands have signed books of condolence to the royal family and participated in other memorial activities throughout our province. I join them in expressing my condolences to King Charles III and the entire royal family. Like so many Manitobans, my family and I will forever cherish our memories of meeting the Queen, and we will be forever grateful for her contributions to Manitoba. That includes her contributions as a leader of remarkable grace and compassion, who was a role model for so many other women around the world. Her late Majesty was an integral part of Manitoba's heritage, bestowing the royal prefix to many of our most beloved cultural institutions. The oldest of these is the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, which in 1953 became the first institution in the Commonwealth to be granted a royal title by the Queen. Madam Speaker, Queen Elizabeth II visited our province 6 times as a member of the royal family, including 5 times as our head of state. Her first visit was in 1951 as a young princess as part of her first Canadian tour, preparing for her lifetime as our beloved Queen. In 1970, for Manitoba's centennial year, she and Prince Philip visited with their 2 eldest children, and then Prince Charles and Princess Anne. During this trip, Her late Majesty traveled to every corner of our beautiful province, which included a famous stay at the Bailey family farm near Carberry. The Baileys hosted a garden party with punch, coffee, and freshly baked cake for the Queen and her family. The Royals also rode horses on their farm, generously provided by the RCMP musical ride. Meeting the Bailey family and many other Manitobans had a lasting impact on our late Queen, and she went on to visit our province 2 more times during her long life. In 2002, to mark her Golden Jubilee, Her late Majesty came here to our Manitoba Legislature to rededicate the newly refurbished Golden Boy that sits atop this beautiful building that we have such a great privilege to work in. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip visited again in 2010, this time to unveil the cornerstone of the new Canadian Museum for Human Rights. She personally selected the cornerstone she gifted the museum from Runnymede, the English meadow where King John signed the Magna Carta, the constitutional document that laid the foundation for democracy in 1215. The event was a fitting one for our Queen's final visit to Manitoba. By making such a generous gift to the museum and to all Manitobans, Her late Majesty demonstrated her unwavering commitment to freedom and human rights for all. Madam Speaker, Canada is a constitutional monarchy. The continuity of the Crown is essential to our Westminster parliamentary democracy. Under our system of government, power is vested in the Crown but entrusted to the democratically elected government to exercise on behalf of the people. The relationship between the Crown and the people, including Indigenous and treaty rights, is affirmed in Canada's Constitution. The monarchy is an integral part of our great country. We must protect and cherish it together as Canadians. Last week, I was honored to attend a memorial service for Her late Majesty at St. John's Anglican Cathedral in Winnipeg. I was struck by the incredible diversity of Manitobans who came to pay their respects. The service included prayers from the Catholic Archbishop of St. Boniface, a Spirit's Welcome song performed by the Warriors of the Royal Winnipeg Rifles Indigenous Drum Group, and a psalm sung in Hebrew by Cantor Tracy Kasner. The entire service was a tribute to Queen Elizabeth II's capacity to bring Manitobans together. As Premier, I encourage all Manitobans to move forward in that same spirit of togetherness under our new monarch, King Charles III. To quote again from that faithful 1947 address by the young Princess Elizabeth, quote, "God help me to make God my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it," end quote. Let us share in the reign of King Charles III, King of Canada, as we did his beloved mother before him. May Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, rest in eternal peace, and may God save the King. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I also want to acknowledge the words that the First Minister shared in condolence to the royal family. I rise today amongst my colleagues. All of us have taken oaths to Queen Elizabeth II and to her descendants. And as a result, I'm here to add my voice as one of condolence to the royal family and all to those who are mourning throughout the Commonwealth. I think that, speaking for most people that I know, Queen Elizabeth II is certainly the monarch that we knew during our lives. And watching the transition to the coronation of King Charles was certainly a first for so many of us. I came home just a few weeks ago to find my oldest watching the procession in England on YouTube, and it was quite a mesmerizing sight. So I sat down and we took that in, historic occasion that it was. I think one of the significant things about Queen Elizabeth is that when she was born, it wasn't necessarily a very likely prospect that she would go on to become the Queen. At the time, she was not a heir apparent, but after King Edward VIII abdicated the throne, she became the next in line, even though she was only 10 years old. And so suddenly, her education, her volunteer work, and her career became guided towards that goal. During the pandemic, I gathered my family to watch her address, which she gave to try and call people to a greater service. The idea of masking, of joining together to fight against the pandemic, was an appeal that she was making on the grounds that we are all in this together and that we are stronger when we work together in service of the common good. And of course, her appeal recognized that it's not easy for us to respond to the call of shared sacrifice, but in fact, perhaps it is the difficulty of rising to that challenge that makes that call so noble. That was a very meaningful moment for us during the pandemic as a family to witness those words, but we shouldn't be surprised. Much earlier in her life, Queen Elizabeth II made similar appeals In fact, when she was as young as a teenager, during World War II, one of her early famous public appearances was a radio address that she was making to other children who were displaced from their homes and their families during the war. And of course, as we were watching the news coverage during the pandemic, we saw clips and we saw excerpts of that famous radio address. And anyone who's a bit of a military history buff or would have seen documentaries about the war will have seen some of those clips as well. And so there, from some 14 years of age, the Queen was already making that call to people to serve their greater good, to serve their nation, but also appealing to a sense of community and togetherness and unity, which certainly transcends far beyond the borders of Britain, the United Kingdom, or the Commonwealth. Now, she did, of course, go through the military service that all members of the royal family participate in, and at the end of World War II, history tells us that she was so overcome with joy that she joined the celebration to mark the end of World War II, going perhaps a little incognito, but joining the streets alongside the rest of London while disguised in her military uniform. Now, after the war, her commitment to service only grew. On her 21st birthday, in a speech, she said, and I quote, "I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service," end quote. And now, having witnessed her time among us come to an end, I think that we can fairly adjudicate that she lived up to that statement. 1947, she became engaged and was married the same year. Of course, she had 4 children. Charles, we now know, is the king, and the one, I guess, who is the head of state and the occupier of the throne that you represent at this very moment there, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So Queen Elizabeth was performing royal duties on behalf of her father while his health was declining. And she was actually on a royal tour of Kenya in 1952 when King George VI passed away, and she became the Queen. It was the first time that a monarch in over 200 years ascended to the throne while they were outside of Britain. She was officially had her coronation ceremony on June 2nd, 1953 at Westminster Abbey. And I believe after the fact, she said that the crown that they put on her head was so heavy that that may have been the only occasion in which she actually wore it. Heavy is the crown, as they say. So this is also a landmark event for many people because it was one of the first times that a national or live event was televised. I'm told that many people bought their first TV set in part so they could take in that coronation ceremony. And it shows you just the influence that the royals have on the globe. Now, after the coronation, Queen Elizabeth traveled extensively, and she's been through countries around the globe, including to here in Canada, and specifically to Manitoba on many occasions. Now, some of the milestones that were celebrated during these times are truly historic. You know, in 1977, there was a silver jubilee after 25 years, the golden jubilee in 2002, celebrating 50, the diamond jubilee in 2012, and of course the platinum jubilee, which we recently celebrated here in Manitoba by bestowing medals onto some of our constituents, veterans, examples of service to the community. And of course, all of us had made our choices of nominees while Queen Elizabeth II was still alive. But I believe that the presentation of those medals to those outstanding members of our community will take on an added significance now that Queen Elizabeth II has passed away. On September 9th, 2015, she became the longest reigning British monarch. And while her husband passed away last year, she did, of course, sit on the throne until 2022. And not only was the longest reigning monarch, but was there through many periods of change. In addition to being part of that live televised address, She was also apparently one of the first people to ever send an email, way back in 1976. So there's a bit of trivia for you, Mr. Acting Speaker. We know that there was many periods of change spanning the world wars through stagflation, economic crises in the 1970s, through periods of global instability and regional conflicts, the financial crisis of 2009, the pandemic that we've all been a part of these last few years. And through it all, the Queen, I think we can say, projected an image of steadiness, of calmness, of respect, and refrained from participating in political issues on a partisan level, and in so doing allowed herself and her image and her name to rise above the fray and continue to be a representation important to many people across the world. Now, of course, we know that her visits here were significant, including to Manitoba. Had an opportunity not only to meet with that family in Brandon, the Baileys, that the First Minister spoke about, but also visited a Hutterite colony, and I think took a special interest in the Hutterian community and their culture. Of course, we see when we leave this building from the south entrance, there's also a plaque dedicated to her name, and I've remarked upon the visits that she paid to us here in this part of the world. But she also traveled to northern Manitoba by way of Thompson, to the Parkland, by way of Dauphin, and to many other communities across rural Manitoba. In fact, one premier said that the Queen's role as a familiar and stable agent during a time of rapid change was so important because, quote, "The age of technology now creates a form of compressed history," end quote. That premier was Howard Pauley in the 1980s. So if we think about technology change, some 40 years ago and what we witness today, I think we could extrapolate that effect has only been compounded. Of course, the dedication of the Golden Boy alongside then Premier Gary Dewar is probably one that's significant to all Manitobans, because whether it's an elder that you're speaking to or a young school child, I think everyone in this province knows about the Golden Boy and recognizes this great building that that figure stands atop. Now, of course, we've heard much about Queen Elizabeth's commitment to service and duty. And she sponsored many, many organizations. There are many schools and community organizations and arts institutions here in our great province that count Queen Elizabeth II as their patron. And so I know that those folks are certainly reflecting on what it meant for them to have the monarch lend her imprimatur to their operations. Interestingly, and I believe my colleague from St. John's may be somewhat of a kindred spirit here, Queen Elizabeth II was a big fan of animals, dogs in particular, and corgis, to be most specific about it. It's said that she owned some 30 companion corgis throughout her life, I believe the first of which was actually a present for her 18th birthday in 1944. So as we've been reflecting upon her life of service, and we have taken turns signing books of condolences or attending public events such as the memorial service, where I had the opportunity to hear the First Minister's words, as well as the extemporaneous comments of the Lieutenant Governor, joining there with my colleagues from this side of the aisle and colleagues from the other side of the aisle as well. I think we've all been thinking about what Queen Elizabeth's life represented and what it meant to many of us. I think I've already shared that her speech during the start of the pandemic was a moment to gather around the TV. So of course this is not a live radio broadcast. Now we're watching it on YouTube, right? And yet still, the ability to have that pulpit, that platform on which to speak to people, I think is an important one. And to recognize that this woman chose to use that platform to call people to serve an idea greater than themselves is truly something that I respect, and encourage other folks across the world to figure out how they might be able to parallel in their own lives. I wanted to also reflect on what she represents to Indigenous nations in Canada and across North America. So you will know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that my mom's side as a family comes from the United Kingdom, and of course we're certainly observing the royal funeral with that experience of watching the monarchy and participating in it that way. But on my father's side of the family, we are from the other side of the treaty relationship. You have the Crown on one side, and on the other side you have the Indigenous nation. In our case, the Anishinaabe Nation within Treaty 3, who engaged in a solemn commitment to work with the Crown from time immemorial, or rooted in rights from time immemorial, I should say, and carrying on into the future for as long as the grass grows, the river flows, and the sun shines, which is to say, forever. And so I would share these words on the record today because insofar as we operate as a so-called constitutional monarchy, that term that we hear so often, in Canada, the Supreme Court has ruled that when it comes to engaging with Indigenous nations, a provincial government or a federal government, again, the Supreme Court of Canada has said that the Crown is indivisible, meaning whether it's the province or the federal government, this principle is equally at stake. It is the honor of the Crown, which is called into question. And so I would say that for all the public leaders and elected officials at provincial and federal governments who have offered their condolences and thoughts about Queen Elizabeth II, I would remind them that one of the ways in which they are called upon to honor the memory of Queen Elizabeth II and to pay tribute to King Charles, who now sits on the throne, is to engage in the relationship with Indigenous nations in a meaningful way, in a respectful way, and a way that truly lives up to that statement, the honor of the Crown. And so with these few words on the record, I want to thank you, who does have the opportunity to sit on a throne before us here today, and all of my colleagues who are gathering together to pay tribute to somebody who I think we can fairly describe as a remarkable individual. And so I do offer my sincere condolences to all those who are mourning Queen Elizabeth II. I also want to recognize that this has motivated many conversations throughout the Commonwealth, and I send a note of understanding to those folks who've reflected on the history of colonization, both across these lands and through the Caribbean and into Africa and to other parts of the globe, and to recognize the conversations that they're carrying out. And of course, I do also want to take this time to recognize the new king, King Charles. So with those few words on the record, I want to once again pay my respects and offer my condolences.
The member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's an honor to rise today, and to start, I just want to would like to recognize Queen Elizabeth II as a person and as a human being. A monarch, of course, is a symbol, and there are few things that more fully take away somebody's humanity than becoming a symbol. And it can certainly be hard to imagine what such a life would be like. Despite the fact that we know so much about them, we might certainly not want to change places with them. But none of us chooses the world or life we are born into, so it's hard to put your mind into being born into a life as strange and as extraordinary as that of Queen Elizabeth. So of course she was a daughter, a mother, a wife, a grandmother, with all the joys and pains that brings, and we're all human beings. We're all born and live and experience joys and delight and pain and loss and come into the world with nothing and leave it with nothing, but we can leave it better or for the worse for our contributions. And I think the Queen's contribution to service is something to marvel at. This was very much the message of the memorial service that the Lieutenant Governor, the Premier, the Leader of the Opposition, and many other leaders from across Manitoba attended at St. John's Cathedral. It included First Nations and Métis leaders, military leaders, the judiciary, and faith leaders. Elizabeth was not born to be queen, but her uncle abdicated the throne, so her own father, who had a speech impediment that made it extremely difficult for him to speak in public, had to step up. In fact, one of his first major speeches, the so-called King's Speech, was here in Winnipeg when he arrived here on tour in the 1930s. It's sometimes been suggested that the stress of becoming king, a wartime king with bombs raining down on civilians in London and across Britain, wore so badly on him that it shortened his life, something which I think his daughter was very aware of. And I think these events shaped her sense of duty to her role and to her country. And beyond that, it was a reaction against the events to which her uncle had abandoned his duty and was seen sometimes flirting with opponents of Britain as well as opponents of democracy and the rule of law. So the very circumstances that put the Queen in line for the throne was that her uncle, by abandoning his sense of duty and obligation, had put his own family and his own country at risk. And when she spoke of her devotion to duty for her whole life, she genuinely meant it. She served in the military in the Second World War. The fact that the royal family chose to stay in England when they were sometimes urged to move to safety was something that was seen as inspirational to the British people during the terrible days, the dark days of the Blitz, the bombing of London. And while we usually think of royalty as being isolated or above the fray, there were also no shortage of personal tragedies and losses. There was a period after the First World War, there was a revolutionary period where many royal families who were cousins and families to the Queen or Prince Philip were executed. They were taken out by revolutionaries, executed by firing squad and bayonet, including children. That included relatives of Prince Philip. Lord Mountbatten was killed by the IRA, and there were other attempts on the family's life, all while they lived under a global microscope of tabloid journalism and celebrity that in the UK in particular was shocking and toxic. There are a few small sort of anecdotes about that I think reveal her character. One of which was she was in Scotland and was talking with two people, and one of them approached and said, "Well, you must see the Queen. She's around here. I understand she lives around here." And the Queen pointed at the person she was with. She said, "Well, I've never met her, but this person here has met her quite a bit." So she ended up taking the photo of the two of them together because he was so excited. The tourist was so excited to meet somebody who had met the Queen. The other was that she had served in the Second World War. She was an enthusiastic. She was a mechanic and an enthusiastic driver. And when the King of Saudi Arabia paid a visit to her, she insisted on driving around her estate in a way that was so startling that he asked for her to slow down because he was worried that she was going to crash the car. She was making a point because in Saudi Arabia, women were not allowed to have driver's licenses. There was a surprising revelation, I think, in the last 10 years that when Margaret Thatcher was first elected, that the Queen was actually to the left of Margaret Thatcher, that the Queen was concerned about the depth of cuts to social welfare programs in Britain at the time that they were being made. And the other is that there's a debate, sometimes in the US and sometimes in other countries, about the possibility of ever having a woman president or a woman head of state in the US, when we've had, for the last 70 years straight, a woman head of state, and there's absolutely no question that that her role was exceptional. And we can't deny and must not deny the harms of the past, of colonization, of the Crown's role in it, and of course of elected officials in, I would say, sometimes undermining the honor and integrity of the Crown. And as part of reconciliation, our task as elected officials is to work to restore the integrity of the Crown and our relationship with the Indigenous people, because it is, in my view, elected officials who tarnish that integrity, and elected officials who will have to build it up. So on the one hand, the Crown and the head of state is embodied in a person, but they are also a symbol of unity, of something which we can all have in common despite our differences. And I think it was at the last visit to Winnipeg that the Queen brought a gift that has become part of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, as the Premier mentioned. And in a very important way, that gesture represents a deep symbol of progress towards democracy, towards human rights, and towards justice. That gift, which she herself selected, was a stone from the building at Runnymede where the Magna Carta was signed over 800 years ago. At the time, signing the Magna Carta may have been seen as little more than barons seizing power from a more powerful monarch, the evil Prince John from Robin Hood stories. And at the time, there were problems with foreign wars, taxation, and people's rights were being violated when they were being arrested and tried. And that's part of what the Magna Carta was trying to address. And it was a step on the road to democracy, and sometimes we've seen, as people know, that the road to progress has detours and reversals. And when we live in a world where we value individual human rights, democracy, and freedom, the idea of a monarchy can seem archaic. Yet at the same time, our public imagination is filled with stories of kings, queens, princesses, and princesses, both real and imagined. And even the fact that the ideal of a separation of church and state is a key American value. The Queen is both the head of state of Canada and the head of state of the UK and other countries, as well as the head of the Anglican Church. And the promises of respecting rights and due process have waxed and waned over the years, but the principle, the idea of peacefully ceding power to democratically elected governments while investing ultimate power in a monarch who can't exercise it is an essential check against the ability of government to seize complete power. It is a paradox, but it is a paradox that helps keep us free. And in Canada and around the world, we have to recognize the truth of history. We need to work to recognize and address injustices of the past and present. Canada, and in fact Winnipeg, played a leading role in advocating for turning British rule around the world into a commonwealth, ending imperial rule from abroad and recognizing that countries must have their own parliaments, their own legal systems, and rule of law and democracy. That was the recommendation of the Durham Report in the 1800s, and legendary editor of the Winnipeg Free Press, John Defoe, was a powerful proponent for it. But while the dreams of progress often falter, the history of Queen Elizabeth's 70-year reign is one of dismantling of colonial rule and the creation of new political systems that have been more inclusive, more democratic, and perhaps most important, have the capacity to continue to change and reform themselves in ways that preserve the peaceful transition of power and democracy and the rule of law while expanding and enhancing rights for all. These are values that all of us, at one point in our history, and as politicians, have fought to defend in our lives as legislators and in conflicts around the world. We cannot pretend perfection, but we do need to remember that out of the crooked timber of humanity, no straight thing was ever made. And if we were to look to someone for a legacy of duty, service, and stability, three very underrated ideas in today's world, it is difficult to imagine anyone comparable. To her family and to all who grieve, we grieve with you. To the Queen, rest in peace, and long live the King. Madame la Présidente, pour commencer, j'aimerais reconnaître la reine Elisabeth II en tant que personne et être humain. Un monarque, bien sûr, est un symbole. Et il y a peu de choses qui enlèvent plus complètement l'humanité que quelqu'un que de devenir un symbole. Nous savons tous qu'aucun de nous ne choisit le monde ou la vie dans laquelle nous sommes nés. Il est donc difficile de faire naître votre esprit dans une vie aussi étrange et extraordinaire que celle de la reine Élisabeth. Nous sommes tous des êtres humains, nous sommes nés, nous vivons, nous pouvons tous éprouver des joies et des délices ou la douleur et la perte. Nous venons au monde avec rien et nous nous laissons avec rien. Tel était le message du service commémoratif que le lieutenant-gouverneur, le premier ministre, le chef de l'opposition et de nombreux autres dirigeants et dignitaires autochtones des forces armées, de la magistrature et de nos chefs religieux ont rendu à l'église de St. John's. Élisabeth n'était pas née pour être reine, mais son oncle a abdiqué la trône. Alors, son propre père, Edward, qui avait un problème d'élocution qui rendait extrêmement difficile de parler en public, a dû intervenir. En fait, l'un de ses premiers grands discours a été prononcé à Winnipeg dans les années 1930. Il a été suggéré que le stress de devenir roi, un roi en temps de guerre avec des bombes pleuvoirs qui pluvaient sur les civiliens à Londres et à travers la Grande-Bretagne, portait si mal sur Edward qu'il a écourté sa vie et affligé sa fille. Il se peut que ces événements aient façonné son sens de devoir, son rôle et son pays, que c'était une réaction contre les événements dans lesquels son oncle avait abandonné son devoir et a été vu comme flirtant avec les adversaires, non seulement de la Grande-Bretagne, mais les adversaires de la démocratie. Les circonstances mêmes qui ont mis Élisabeth sur la voie du trône étaient que son oncle, en abandonnant son sens du devoir et de l'obligation, avait mis sa propre famille et le pays en danger. Et quand elle a parlé de son dévouement pour le devoir toute sa vie, elle le pensait vraiment. Et cela signifiait une tragédie personnelle et de perte. Il y a une période après la Première Guerre mondiale où de nombreuses familles royales, les cousins et la famille de la reine ou de Prince Philip, ont été exécutés par peloton d'exécution et baïonnettes, y compris les enfants. Lord Mountbatten a été tué par l'IRA et il y a eu d'autres tentatives sur la vie de sa famille, alors qu'il vivait sur un microscope mondial de journalisme tabloïd et de célébrités qui, au Royaume-Uni en particulier, étaient choquants et toxiques. Et nous ne pouvons ni ne devons nier les torts du passé, de la colonisation, du rôle de la couronne à cet égard et du rôle des représentants élus dans l'atteinte à l'intégrité de la couronne. Mais dans le cadre d'une réconciliation, une partie de notre tâche, en tant que représentants élus, consiste à travailler à rétablir l'intégrité de la couronne et notre relation avec les peuples autochtones, car ce sont les représentants élus qui ont terni cette intégrité et les représentants élus qui devront la renforcer. Au Canada, la couronne et le chef de l'État sont une personne, mais ils sont aussi un symbole d'unité, de quelque chose que nous pouvons tous avoir en commun malgré nos différences. Je crois que c'était lors de la dernière visite à Winnipeg que la reine a apporté un cadeau qui devrait faire partie du Musée canadien des droits de la personne. Et d'une manière très importante, ce geste représente un profond symbole de progrès vers la démocratie, vers les droits des personnes et vers la justice. Ce cadeau était une pierre du bâtiment de Runnymede où la Magna Carta a été signée il y a plus de 800 ans à l'époque. Il peut avoir été vu comme peu plus que des barons saisissant le pouvoir d'un monarque plus puissant. À l'époque, il y avait des problèmes avec les guerres étrangères, la fiscalité et les droits des gens qui étaient violés lorsqu'ils étaient arrêtés et jugés. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. Mais alors que nous vivons dans un monde où nous valorisons les droits de la personne, la démocratie et la liberté, l'idée d'une monarchie peut sembler archaïque. Mais en même temps, notre imagination publique est remplie d'histoires de rois, de reines, de princes et de princesses, à la fois réelles et imaginaires. L'idée de la séparation de l'Église et de l'État est une valeur américaine clé, mais la reine était à la fois chef de l'État du Canada et chef de l'Église anglicane. Les promesses de respect des droits et d'application régulière de la loi se sont estampées au fil des ans. Mais le principe, l'idée de céder pacifiquement le pouvoir à des gouvernements démocratiquement élus, tout en investissant le pouvoir ultime dans un monarque qui ne peut l'exercer, est un frein essentiel à la capacité d'un gouvernement de s'emparer du pouvoir complet. C'est une paradoxe, mais c'est une paradoxe qui nous garde libres. Nous ne pouvons nier les torts de la colonisation au Canada et partout dans le monde. Nous devons reconnaître la vérité de l'histoire et nous devons nous efforcer de reconnaître et de corriger les injustices du passé et du présent. Le Canada et Winnipeg ont joué un rôle du premier plan dans la promotion de la transformation de la domination britannique dans le monde en un Commonwealth, mettant fin à la domination impériale de l'étranger et reconnaissant que les pays doivent avoir leur propre parlement, système juridique et primauté du droit et démocratie. C'était la recommandation du rapport Durham dans les années 1800 et le légendaire rédacteur en chef du Winnipeg Free Press, John Defoe, en était un ardent défenseur. Les rêves du progrès vacillent souvent, mais l'histoire du règne de 70 ans de la reine Élisabeth est l'un des démantèlements de la domination coloniale et la création de nouveaux systèmes politiques plus inclusifs et plus démocratiques, et avoir la capacité de changer et de se reformer de la manière à préserver la transition pacifique du pouvoir et de la primauté du droit. Ce sont des valeurs pour lesquelles nous nous sommes tous battus dans notre vie comme législateurs et dans les conflits qui ont cours dans le monde. Nous ne pouvons pas prétendre à la perfection, mais nous devons tous rappeler que du bois tordu de l'humanité, aucune chose droite n'a jamais été faite. Et si nous devons nous tourner vers quelqu'un pour un héritage de devoir, de service et de stabilité, trois idées très sous-estimées dans le monde d'aujourd'hui, il est difficile d'imaginer quelqu'un de comparable. À sa famille, Et à tous ceux qui souffrent, nous pleurons avec vous. À la reine Élisabeth, reposez en paix et Dieu sauve le roi. Merci.
The Honorable Minister of Justice.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Acting Speaker. It's been fascinating to watch the outpouring of grief and of remembrance for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II since her passing. And what I found particularly interesting is that even those who would not traditionally consider themselves monarchists had great respect for Queen Elizabeth. And it's caused me to reflect on the reasons why, Mr. Acting Speaker. And I think that there are two. I mean, I'm sure that there are more, but two that come to my mind most specifically. And one is, has already been mentioned, is her devotion to duty. At a very, very young age, she committed to the duty of the monarchy, not knowing, of course, what that duty would entail or how long that it would last, because she did it in her early 20s. And she demonstrated that duty in many different ways. One was in visiting the different Commonwealth nations and realms that the Queen of the monarchy was responsible for, and Canada being chief among them. I understand it has been often repeated in the last couple of weeks that she visited Canada more often than any other country, and that she considered it like being at home. And Canadians will remember that iconic picture of 1982 on Parliament Hill where Queen Elizabeth II was signing the Constitution and helping then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau repatriate the Constitution to Canada. And that demonstrated, I think, that her sense of duty to Canada, even as things were changing when it came to the monarchy. Her sense of duty extended to things like Christmas messages, simple things, and often we would talk to constituents, often seniors, who would talk about how they would listen to the Christmas or New Year's message from the Queen. It was very important to them. It was a part of their tradition. She would give those messages and offer encouragement and support, and the leader of the official opposition spoke about the pandemic message. I remember her specifically saying in that message that we will gather again, we will be together again, and of course, we are together again, Mr. Acting Speaker. She was right, but she gave encouragement at a time when it wasn't as certain how things would go. And yet we know that her own grief through the loss of her husband during the pandemic, and that iconic now and sad picture of her sitting alone because of the pandemic restrictions and mourning the loss of her husband. So that incredible sense of duty is, I think, why so many Canadians, regardless of their views of the monarchy, are drawn towards this moment. And also, of course, her resiliency, resilient through the challenges of war, economic turmoil, political turmoil, personal turmoil in the royal family. Resilient, just continue to persevere. Or as the British would sometimes say, keep calm and carry on. And she demonstrated that in such a real way through the many, many years that she was the monarch and the Queen for all of the realms and the Commonwealth and for Great Britain. Incredibly, incredibly calm, reassuring, and set such a strong example. And now we have a king, Mr. Acting Speaker, a king who at one point visited this assembly, who spoke just to your left, Mr. Acting Speaker. There was a podium there, and now the King Consort was sitting over here, and we all had the opportunity to listen to then Prince Charles speak in this assembly, and now he's ascended to the throne, and there are changes, and of course we wish him well in the fulfillment of his duties, but also recognizing that he's not just taking on these duties, but he's also grieving the loss of a mother. And I think that's one of the things that we sometimes forget, that these are positions, and these are positions of individuals who we see, but they're people. And we should also remember that the royal family is grieving the loss of someone who was not simply the Queen, but was a mother, a grandmother, and many other connections in that family. So I will conclude my comments, Mr. Acting Speaker, but I would want to ask if you could ask for leave, that at the conclusion of the, when everyone has spoken, that we have a moment of silence at the conclusion of this debate.
Is there leave for a moment of silence after the debate has concluded? Agreed and so ordered. The member for Concordia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm honored to rise to join with my colleagues, members of this Legislative Assembly, to offer our condolences to the royal family and to all of those in the Commonwealth throughout the nations who are mourning the Queen at this time. I also am proud to join with members of all members in Manitoba, citizens of Manitoba across Canada and throughout the world, who have demonstrated their love and affection and appreciation for the role that the Queen has played in our country in over the years, so many years, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I was quite honored to join with members of this Legislative Assembly to attend Her Majesty's official memorial service at St. John's Anglican Cathedral. My first time in that incredible place of worship, and it was an amazing gathering of so many different people, folks who have been impacted by the Queen and the service that the Queen showed and the role that the Queen played in all of our lives. It was a touching memorial and quite a fitting display from our province to the Commonwealth, to the royal family, of our condolences. It's important for me, I think, to personally to put some words on the record. Not much of a monarchist myself. I appreciate that many have much more in terms of the facts and the details of the Queen and the royal family's particulars of their personal lives and their service to the country. But from my perspective, I rise today as a member of the Mennonite community here in Manitoba, as somebody who was raised in a household that did appreciate the role that the monarchy played. I remember fondly pulling open sort of a forgotten drawer in the living room side table, and we would have old newspaper clippings of the royal wedding or of other royal events. And my mother would later explain to me that the monarchy plays a special role for Mennonites in that we as a people, when we were left as refugees, religious refugees, and eventually came to Russia at that time, it was Catherine the Great that welcomed us to that place. And it was an understanding between the Mennonites and the monarch at that time that they would be able to live and contribute in their own way, free of persecution. And so in later years, when Mennonites were once again persecuted and pushed out of Russia and were coming to Canada as an option, they saw the arrangement that they made was with the crown and not with the government of the day, because they saw the power of the crown to supersede those specific rules and laws at the time. And it was a deal that was made to protect our language, protect our faith, allow us to live as pacifists here in this country, that we understood the role of the crown to be so vital for that operation. We, likewise, of course, we heard about the importance of the crown to Indigenous people in the treaty relationship that I think is just so important to who we are as Canadians and as Manitobans. So we value that. I think so many Manitobans value that. And, it may be easy to ask ourselves, why is it important still in this day and age to adhere to such an old tradition or a set of traditions in the crown? I do think there is a value to it, and I'll say this is the reason, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You know, we only have to look down south. We only have to look at countries like the United States who have gone through so much turmoil and gone through so much change. You know, the Leader of the Opposition talked about the change that Premier Pauly talked about. Well, today it has been only so much more accelerated. With that amount of change, it is important to have that continuity, to have that steadiness, that consistency that the Crown represents. Every day we come in and the Mace allows us to begin our work as legislators in a democratic society that values that tradition. I think that's important to who we are as Canadians. I think that's important to who we are as Manitobans. I think it's important that we continue to value that tradition. And with the Queen's passing, I know we are now in good hands under the new monarch, and we look forward to continuing to promote democracy here in this province under the new King. Long live the King. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I too was at last week's service at St. John's Cathedral along with many of my colleagues. I just want to share, I guess, the message that I had put into the Book of Condolence message to Your Majesty and members of the royal family. First of all, my deepest condolences to all of you and the nations of the Commonwealth. For me personally, and throughout my lifetime on this earth, your mother, grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, was a fixture to my country of Canada. She truly was an icon. I myself pledged allegiance to the Queen and to my country back in 1990 with the Canadian Armed Forces. I served for 10 years with pride, wearing the uniform with your insignia on it, the Queen's insignia. I traveled throughout the world, I, along with my colleagues in all branches of the Army, Air Force, and in my case with the Royal Canadian Navy, and on Her Majesty's Canadian ship, Winnipeg, served with pride and honor. I'll always cherish those times in uniform. She served with dignity and honor, and as a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, it was my duty to serve the Queen and country to the fullest. As a current member of the Legislative Assembly in Manitoba and as a Minister of the Crown, it will remain that way, serving duty to the fullest. To the late Queen Elizabeth II, thank you for your service. To Your Majesty King Charles III, God save the Queen. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The member for St. Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. First, I'd like to begin my remarks by passing along my condolences to the royal family, to the Queen's family who have experienced this loss, not just on the way we have from a global level, but really from a personal level by the loss of a mother, a grandmother. That's never easy within any family, and especially when it's a person in the family who has been such an everlasting presence, not just within a family, but within a society, and frankly, globally. I want to begin my remarks by also mentioning that I attended the memorial service held here in Winnipeg last week to acknowledge the passing and witness the gathering amongst Manitobans who pay tribute to the steadfastness of the Queen in our community. And it's important, I think, for any person who has been lost to acknowledge the life that they lived, the choices that they made, and the impact that their life had on their family and on their community, and in the Queen's case, on many nations around the globe. I come to make these remarks today from both the perspective of someone who was elected to serve as a Queen's, under the Queen's democracy here in Manitoba, but also as someone who is a Canadian and someone who is immigrants of another colonial country, Trinidad and Tobago. And so I come to bring that perspective as well. And I come to also share that there are many people who are here in our country who have very mixed feelings about the legacy of the monarchy, not particularly necessarily the Queen herself, but what that institution represents. And I think it's important that as we remember the Queen, we take into consideration those perspectives as well. My country, where my family originates from, Trinidad and Tobago, was colonized by the Spanish and the French and the English, the British Empire. And the British Empire in, I believe, 1797, and held that way through the 1800s until Trinidad formed independence in 1962. And through that time, the monarch was present. And since the Queen became onto the throne, she was an everlasting presence throughout the Commonwealth, including Trinidad and Tobago, which gained their independence under the Queen's reign. And so her legacy extends to the colonial history, but it also extends to the independence of many nations and the change, the course of the way many countries across the globe operate as independent nations or as republics. And that change is in part because of the monarch and the Queen that we had in Queen Elizabeth. And so I think that it's important to acknowledge and remember that as part of her history and legacy across the globe. I also just want to share a brief personal story that I've had with the Queen. When the Queen made her last visit to Winnipeg in 2010, she came to spend the last time here, and it was part of the unveiling of a tree planting ceremony and also the dedication for the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. And the cornerstone was used, that was chosen from the Queen. And this is the site where the Magna Carta, one of the first documents containing human rights, was signed in 1812. Now, I was there at that event in 2010 when the Queen was there, but not only that, my partner was playing with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra at the time, and as the Queen attended the final concert, my wife was on stage performing at the Forks at the Human Rights concert. So it comes very close to home to know that people in my household performed and played and were there and witnessed the Queen here in Manitoba. So I'll conclude my remarks by saying that we, again, wish the deepest condolences to all people who feel the loss of the Queen, especially the closest to her, her family, the royal family. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The member for Brandon East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Today is a somber day in this House, and usually I'm happy to rise to speak, but today the tone is different. Today I'm honored. Queen Elizabeth II was not only a monarch, she was not only the head of state for the United Kingdom and many countries across the realm of the Commonwealth, but also the Commander-in-Chief of Britain's armed forces. As the Special Envoy for Military Affairs for Manitoba, it is my privilege today to offer my condolences on her passing. Many members of the Canadian military have a special connection to the appreciation for Queen Elizabeth II. She was more than just a commander-in-chief to many members, but someone who was deeply involved in advocating for their well-being and supporting Canadian service members during their operations at home and abroad, and continued to champion for their well-being even upon their return from service. Her Majesty had a long-standing relationship with the Canadian Armed Forces, holding a number of honorary appointments, including serving as Colonel-in-Chief of several Canadian military units, regiments, and branches. The support that Queen Elizabeth offered was not simply in thoughts and policy, but in actions as well.
She has shown this through commitment by contributing her own service as a truck driver and mechanic during the Second World War. When Queen Elizabeth, at the time the Princess, volunteered to join the Auxiliary Territorial Service, at the time the women's branch in the British Army, King George made sure that his daughter was not given a special rank in the Army. She started as a second subaltern in the ATS and was later promoted to junior commander, the equivalent of captain. Newspapers at the time dubbed her Princess Auto Mechanic. The jobs were dangerous, and during the course of war, 335 ATS women were killed and many more were injured. On May 8, 1945, the war in Europe ended. In London, thousands of people took to the streets to celebrate. Princess Elizabeth, dressed in her ATF uniform, slipped into the crowds with her sister to enjoy the festivities. As a member of the ATS, she was the first female of the royal family to be an active duty member in the British Armed Forces. The Queen was also the last head of state to have served during the Second World War. During her 22 visits to Canada, Her Majesty, the Queen, reaffirmed her close relationship with several Canadian military units, as well as numerous regiments and branches that bear royal designations. For example, some of these units operate and train in Manitoba, such as the Royal Winnipeg Rifles and the Royal Canadian Horse Artillery. Our connection between members serving here in Manitoba and Queen Elizabeth is personal for some members. In 2021, some of the members from CFB Shiloh were asked to join the Queen's Guard. This extraordinary opportunity took members from Shiloh over to the royal residence in London and other royal families' locations throughout the city. The Royal Regiment of the Canadian Artillery was invited to form the Queen's Guard to honor and commemorate the 150th anniversary of the formation of the Royal Regiment of the Canadian Artillery A and B batteries. On the Queen's iconic visit in 1970, dubbed by many as the Queen's visit to a Manitoba farm, the often overlooked part of this time she spent was with members at CFB Shiloh after visiting Carberry potato farms nearby. The media at the time followed that the impact the visit had on the Bailey and the family farm, but I am sure that many members of Shiloh were also grateful to have a chance to just meet such an important guest. Queen Elizabeth stood for Manitoba's soldiers and stood with our members and had the opportunity to return the service through this operation. I would like to extend my most sincere and heartfelt condolences to members of the royal family and all those who are grieving the passing of our late Queen. Queen Elizabeth II upheld the values of character, humility, and loyalty, which play a large role in the responsibilities that the Canadian service members carry with them each and every day. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak on the motion of condolences on the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, September the 8th, just 20 days ago. 69 years ago, June the 2nd, 1953, was the coronation of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. It was one of the most memorable events of my early childhood. It was interestingly also the date of my younger brother's birthday. He was 1 year old. And in my 5-year-old mind, I thought it was kind of neat for the Queen to have her coronation on my brother's birthday. My mother was a historian. She could name from memory many of the kings and queens of England. Now, much of the focus in Canada today is on colonialism and reconciliation, and rightly so. It is one of the most important issues we have in Canada today. But we also need to remember today that there is much that is positive in British history. England was where modern parliamentary democracy evolved. It's proven to be a remarkable, stable form of government with a history of 1,000 years of evolving. As James Lovelock wrote, people in England, apart from one civil war, have lived through 1,000 years of internal peace, during which have evolved a common law of decent behavior and a hierarchy that tries to sort the good from the bad. It's a story which includes the foundational charter, the Magna Carta, over 800 years ago, and the monarchs have played a role in that stability. It is a storied history which now includes Elizabeth II and her long and much-traveled reign. In Canada, Elizabeth II was our monarch for 7 decades. She visited Canada many times, and on several of these memorable occasions, she came to Manitoba. In 1984, my wife Naomi and I, together with our daughter Pauline, were fortunate to meet the Queen in front of the Children's Hospital. For me, a pediatrician working then at the hospital, it was a special occasion. In 2002, while I was the leader of the Manitoba Liberal Party, Naomi and I had a second opportunity to meet the Queen, this time in a receiving line here at the Manitoba Legislature. We still have a photo of that occasion. In 2010, once again, the Queen visited the Manitoba Legislature. This time, Naomi and I were fortunate to be at a reception at the Lieutenant Governor's residence. Prince Philip went around one side of the room while the Queen went around the other. We enjoyed a short conversation with the Prince. It was on this occasion that the Queen brought the cornerstone of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, a stone from Runnymede, where the original Magna Carta was signed in 1215. A copy of the Magna Carta, made in 1217, was on display in 2010 here at the Manitoba Legislature. Today, we pay a special tribute to the longest reigning monarch in British history and one of the longest reigning monarchs in the world. It is not just the length of her reign that we honor, but the quality of her time as a monarch. When measured by both length of time and quality of rule, Elizabeth II stands out. We join together to remember the Queen for her poise, her many thoughtful comments, and her positive influences on a frequently troubled world. Together, we extend our condolences to all the members of the royal family. It is a time of great loss, but also a time to acknowledge and remember her reign, replete with many great accomplishments. It is also a time to wish King Charles III well as he carries out his duties as the King of England, Canada, and other countries in the months and years ahead. We hope he will come to Winnipeg soon. I remember well his visit to Winnipeg in 1997. As I was then a minister in Prime Minister Jean Chrétien's cabinet, I had an opportunity to meet him and to see firsthand his deep concern for environmental issues. I hope he continues his emphasis on the environment and on saving our planet during his reign as king. Thank you, merci, miigwech, for this opportunity to speak.
The member for Radisson.
Here I am. I was happy to defer to the members opposite, but I'm also happy to speak at this time. Thank you, Mr. Acting Deputy Speaker. I swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, so help me God. This is how I entered into my political career here, and I believe this is how so many of us, either through swearing or affirmation, entered into our service as MLAs, including the brand new member for Thompson. I just checked with him, and when he took his oath of office, the Queen was still with us. I dare say there is not an MLA in this House who has known any other monarch of Canada, although perhaps one of us was a terrible toddling 2-year-old when she ascended the throne in 1952. I'll leave that MLA nameless. Now, most people don't want to think about death. And I think there's a sense of why that is. But the Queen was not like that. Her funeral was meticulously planned. It was carefully performed, and it reflected her personality, her faith, her sense of service, her life of selflessness, her lifelong commitment to serve God. She chose each hymn, each text. She even designed her hearse. She approved a plan for how to transport her body overseas if she should die far away from home. And she was proud to say that she would be transported the same way that soldiers from her military, of which she's the commander-in-chief, would also be transported in the back of a Hercules. Now, if you want a clue to what our Queen thought and how what faith she wanted to reflect, the message she wanted to send to the citizens across the Commonwealth, I think you can look at the hymns and at the text that she chose for her funeral. The final verse of the last hymn read as follows: "Finish then thy new creation, pure and spotless let us be. Let us see thy great salvation perfectly restored in thee, changed from glory into glory, till in heaven we take our place, till we cast our crowns before thee, lost in wonder, love, and praise." She knew where she was going. She was confident who she'd see there. Queen Elizabeth II had a true and living faith and a true and living Savior. And it's been my privilege, our privilege, to have a monarch who loyally served the King of Kings. She also chose Bible passages that were dear and precious to her to clearly declare her faith in Jesus as she approached death. I'm sure she hoped that billions of people around the world would hear and reflect upon and be encouraged by the tremendous truths of the verses she chose. Here are just a few. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die." John 11:25-26. Also 1 Corinthians 15:54 and 55. "Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" Also John 14, verse 6, which is the passage read by Prime Minister. Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." The very familiar Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Job 19:25. "I know that my Redeemer lives." Revelation 14, verse 13. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord." Her faith was also reflected in the sermon delivered by Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury. I believe some of those texts have been, or those quotes have been made already by other speakers. But in all of this, we could see that we had a queen who deeply trusted in God and who put her faith in God as an example for all those in the Commonwealth to follow. I will always be grateful for her. My condolences to King Charles III, his family, and all those affected by the Queen's passing. God save the King.
The Honourable Member for the Pas-Camissac.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's always an honor to stand up and within this chamber to speak on behalf of my constituents for the Pas and Camissac. And it's also an honor to participate in this opportunity to put our words on record on what historical worldly event that we just went through when Queen Elizabeth died. Like everyone else, everyone around the world, I watched the ceremony, hundreds and hundreds of years tradition ceremony. It was just ancient, and it was just amazing to watch this history on TV. And just between you and I, Madam Speaker, you know, it's my guilty pleasure, the monarchy family, only because, not because of their personalities, it's because of their history. You know, hundreds and hundreds of years, their family lineage, you know, and the crazy history, you know, multiple wives, and, you know, at one time they were the government, you know, they had the say of what happened within the land. So that's just crazy to watch the amount of power that they had once. And that's why I'm a history buff and I like watching things like that. And like everyone else, you know, during the funeral, just hearing the bagpipes play triggered me when my late father passed away. So whenever I would hear the bagpipes play, I would think about my loss and my family, and I would truly, you know, felt how, you know, anyone would feel after losing, you know, a matriarch or a patriarch within the family. And I too was at the service for the Queen in St. John's with many colleagues here within the chamber. And I was glad that we got this opportunity as MLAs because I wanted to be part of that history, to be sitting there with this beautiful painting portrait of the Queen and this beautiful church. And the way the choir sounded within that church, I've never heard that live before. They sounded like angels. And the singing, and there was other languages that were in there. And so I was really honored to be sitting beside my colleagues, member from Transcona, to participate in this significant opportunity. So Queen Elizabeth, she was first in Manitoba in 1951, but as a princess. But it failed to say in here that in 1970, she actually went to the Paw. She went there to go participate in the 100th anniversary of Manitoba's entry into Confederation. And KCC, that's where the school she went to go visit, which was the Kuwaitan Community College. And there's actually a plaque there that indicates, and preserves the fact that she was there at the school. And many people that I know still remember her visit. Of course, it was a big, big deal. And with that too, our former MLA, Frank Whitehead, shared a quick story about his late father, who actually met Princess Elizabeth during World War II. They needed their military vehicles fixed, and these young ladies were helping them, and they had no idea who this young lady was until there was a little bit discussion in the crowd when it was pointed out that's Princess Elizabeth. So yeah, she was described as being very humble, no special privilege, attention or anything like that. And then 2002, my dad had the opportunity to have dinner here with the Queen, but he decided to give away his ticket to a granddaughter and a grandmother at the school, at Joey Ross School. So these two individuals had a chance of a lifetime to have dinner with the Queen here. And my dad preferred to be at his cabin, probably watching a Blizzard game. But what I want to put on record here, that she was the representation of the Crown as head of state and its treaties. Indigenous people have long honored the relationship with the Crown for the stability and continuity it provided for the Royal Proclamation of 763, which recognized and protected their rights. So we must remember 1763. This is how ancient this relationship is with Indigenous people and the Crown. And people need to know that the relationship between the Crown and Indigenous people is at the heart of any treaty. And I'm looking forward to King Charles and moving forward and modernizing our current relationship. Egwese.
The Honourable Minister of Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, as the Minister of Seniors and Long-Term Care, it's my honor to speak to Queen Elizabeth II's condolence motion. Queen Elizabeth was the longest reigning female sovereign in history. She held her reign for 70 years over 15 Commonwealth realms across 3 continents. Many, many seniors of Manitoba grew up with our Queen, Queen Elizabeth II. At age 25, Queen Elizabeth became Queen of the Commonwealth countries, with Canada being one of the most prominent countries. At a young age of 25, when called to the monarchy, she never neglected her duties. Steadfast loyalty to our sovereigns became even more prominent in Manitoba during and after World War II. There were many Canadians who fought loyally for the Commonwealth and did so with such pride. The royal family, including Elizabeth, displayed such courage during that time. Madam Speaker, the Queen is well respected in all of the Commonwealth realms, and it was apparent she felt that she had to earn that loyalty. A symbol of respect can be identified by the feature of her picture in government facilities, creating a sense of pride for all of us. And not only in government facilities, but I've been particularly humbled by the representation of the support for the Queen throughout Royal Canadian Legions all across our great province. Under our parliamentary system, the sovereign is the head of state. The Queen respected and understood her role and did not interfere with parliamentary or legislative governance. A fine example of her governance was when Canada adopted its own Canadian Constitution. Queen Elizabeth visited our country and province on many occasions. I recall the excitement and sense of pride exhibited by people from all generations and all walks of life. The Queen was respected and beloved and will be deeply missed. What truly brought home the sense of loss we all felt was a comment made to me by an elderly senior I was chatting with recently. She said, "We lost our Queen, but I feel I lost a friend that I grew up with." I thank you for the opportunity to speak to this condolence. Rest in peace, Queen Elizabeth, and God save the King.
The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the people of Transcona, our constituents, I had the privilege to express to the royal family our collective sorrow on the passing of their mother, their grandmother, and their great-grandmother. This person was not just the Queen, but also somebody that was revered by a loving family. And certainly when we do lose a member of our family, we grieve, and we had the opportunity and the privilege to grieve collectively the passing of our sovereign. As head of our government and as head of the Commonwealth, the Queen played an important, symbolic, and unifying role. And if there's one thing that we can take from that, it was the importance of duty and the importance of representing the people that you were there and placed there for. And having that importance brought forward and embodied by this person was really important to the people of Transcona. I can tell you, oh, sorry, I have it on my microphone. I can tell you that my wife's family is of British origin, Scottish and English, and always talked about the importance of having that Queen in place representing what their values were, but also, interestingly enough, Madam Speaker, how those values were based upon the very same ethics that really drive us, drive our passion for service to people and service to, as has been stated already, service to animals. Horses, she's well known for revering her corgis. Many of us have those same passions and pursuits. I will also say that my first exposure to the monarch was when I was a 6-year-old, 1970 in grade 1, Central School. We were learning about the monarchy, but we were also learning about Manitoba history because coincidentally, that was the 100th anniversary of Manitoba. Now imagine starting school in grade 1 and learning about this entire history. And I have very fond, distinct memories of that time in that classroom. And many of them are attached to Queen Elizabeth and the royal family. What was really interesting in 1970 when the Queen and her family visited here is that they had a royal coach. And really about the only time that the Queen ever passed through Transcona was on that royal coach. Never stopped, unfortunately, but had a great visit. But we did have the opportunity to see the coach go down the main line there. In 1984, in her visit here, I chanced upon actually coming across the Queen's motorcade. I was cutting through Hudson Bay, right on the corner of Portage Memorial, Madam Speaker, and going to class at the UW. I come out, and who do I see, and what do I see? The motorcade and the Queen wave, and I wave back. My only brush with royalty. But I will tell you, that sovereign, even though probably had met millions of people, still understood the importance of connection with citizens, with the people that she was visiting, which is really important. All of us take that as MLAs when we're out in our communities, connecting with our constituents. That's the one thing that we take from this sovereign. 70 years of this kind of service, Madam Speaker. It rubs off. I know every member here, and it's been a privilege to listen to every member here speak on this condolence motion. And the one common theme that has come out is our collective dedication to the people that we represent, and the Queen certainly embodied that. These are important pieces. We do important work here. And it's always a privilege to be here to put words on a record, because it's not just our words. These are the words of the people that we represent. I just want to close by saying that Her Majesty led a long life. It was well lived, a life of selfless service, absolute devotion to duty. She's an example to us all, and may she rest in peace. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would like to briefly put a few words on the record to acknowledge an extraordinary woman who impacted lives across the globe. No one chooses the situations that we are all born into. What we do have the choice in is to rise up to each of our own potentials and choose to be kind. I believe Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, lived a life demonstrating her great potential and actioned many kindnesses. I am thankful for her faithful example of calm, patience, and grace through difficult times, and I honor her legacy as a woman leader who was loved and deeply respected. My condolences to the royal family as they grieve the loss of their matriarch. May she rest in eternal peace. After a lifetime of service, she has indeed earned her rest. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm honored to rise and have the opportunity to share some thoughts about Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. People around the world are taking time to show their respect and pay tribute to the Queen in many different ways. I know for myself, I really valued having the opportunity to attend a service of Thanksgiving with many of my colleagues here in the House. It was a beautiful service where we prayed, we sang, and we paid tribute to the Queen. Madam Speaker, many people pay tribute through different ways. Some will have the opportunity to sign condolence books all around the world. Someone just yesterday actually told me a story about how the night prior, so even over this past week, Madam Speaker, they intentionally stayed up all night as a form of tribute and respect to the Queen. And even this, and what we're doing right here in these chambers, this is a way with these condolence motions that we are able to show our respect and pay tribute to our Queen. Madam Speaker, for myself personally, I will always admire Her Majesty for her curiosity and for her love of life. Her Majesty will be remembered as a strong queen and a strong mother, grandmother, wife, sister, and daughter. She wore many hats, and somehow through it all, the more she reigned, the many, many years that she reigned, Madam Speaker, the more of her kindness and intellect and curiosity just radiated off of her. We can only strive to have values as high as hers and the elegance she demonstrated her entire life in serving the public. I'm echoing what I've heard a couple of my colleagues here in the House share today, but the Queen shared some words during the pandemic of "we will be together again," and I know for myself personally, that really helped carry me through the pandemic. It really stuck with me, and even now, as the pandemic hopefully is coming to a real end, Madam Speaker, the words still resonate with me. The hope of all of us being together again. We have been incredibly blessed. Long live the King.
The Honourable Member for Rossmere.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to pay tribute to Her Majesty, the late Queen Elizabeth II. She was by any assessment a remarkable woman, a leader who understood her role and was able to be both the figurehead of a giant political system spanning many countries, but also one who brought direction, guidance, and stability. The sheer duration of her reign, more than 70 years, is in itself remarkable and made her, for many of us, one who had always been there. When Queen Elizabeth took the throne of England at the age of 25, in 1952, she pledged herself to a lifetime of service, a promise she kept right up until the very week of her passing, where just 2 days before, she swore in her 15th British Prime Minister. She was 96 years old and had no retirement, and her last public event was to open a hospice, the kind of work that all of us in this chamber routinely do. Someone who was there noted how warm she was, how interested in people she was, and how sincerely friendly she was to those she interacted with. Queen Elizabeth II was the last living person in British public life to serve in uniform in World War II. She was the first female member of the royal family in 1,000 years to serve full-time in the armed forces. She was a mechanic, and she was the Queen. She was a woman of honor, relating to world leaders of every political stripe while retaining her own distinction. She was wise, approachable, giving counsel to her own prime ministers, yet managing to stay above the political fray. And it is precisely this reason that I believe our constitutional monarchy is a precious thing, because it entails a lasting stability that outlives political parties and personalities. All of us will come and go, but the Constitution and the monarchy will still be there, just as they have been for generations. She was a woman of honor, but also of humor. I recall hearing one story by her longtime security guard, who was often with her during her downtime in the Highlands of Scotland. On such occasions, she would routinely talk with walking travelers and met an American tourist who asked her if she had ever met the Queen. Oh, she said, "I've never met the Queen personally," the tourist still not realizing who he was speaking with. But she did say, "My friend here," the anonymous security guard who was with her, "my friend has met her many times." "Oh, wow," the American tourist said, "that's really quite something. Do you think you could take a picture of me with your friend who's met the Queen?" And so the Queen took a picture of her security guy with this tourist, and the tourist was extremely thankful and bumbled along his way after the picture was taken, and the Queen and her security guy chuckled to themselves as they walked on. And she was that kind of person. She also is the only political leader, I think, who has opened the Olympics by staging a skit where they jumped out of a helicopter wearing a pink dress at the age of, I don't know, I think she was over 90 years old when that particular one happened. She was a humorous person, and there was a lightness about her which enriched the whole. So with those few thoughts in mind, I do want to honor her memory, I want to honor her legacy, and there are many things that with generations will change. There are some things that when they've gone, you want them to last a little longer, and I hope that all of us can take those good qualities that Queen Elizabeth II modeled in her life and incorporate them into our own public service. She will not be forgotten. She is a record holder in many, many respects, a remarkable woman, and one who will live in the hearts of all who were honored to encounter her, maybe in person and maybe like I only did from a distance. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any further members wishing to speak to the condolence motion? If not, is the House ready for the question? Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the condolence motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. I declare the motion carried. Would everybody please rise now for a moment of silence? The honourable member for Rossmere.
Madam Speaker, wondering if you could canvass the House to find out if it is the will of the House to call at 5 o'clock.
Is it the will of the House to call at 5 o'clock? Agreed and so ordered. The hour being 5 p.m. This House is adjourned and stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.